I got it.
Okay.
I'm just going to have to be here.
Thank
Okay, got it.
Brad, can you hear us?
you. They gonna slaughter me?
No,
I can.
they are, they're very open. I told them what was going to
Oh,
happen.
you got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Has that got the cover on it? Oh, it's the way
Just pull it.
I don't know how to do these things.
There you go.
I'm too stupid. Thank you.
Nope, stop.
So I'd like to call to order the May 1st meeting of the Town of Kiowa Island Ways and Means Committee. If everybody would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. All right, where'd Petra go? Oh, can you do? You want to do the roll call?
Mr. Moffitt?
Here.
Ms. Gabriella?
Here.
Mr. Bell?
Remotely here.
All right. Mr. Berner? Dr. Heidifelder?
Yes.
Ms. Tillerson? Here. Ms. Schubert? Here.
Okay, we have two sets of minutes to approve. The first is February 27th, and the second is March 27th. I guess we do these one at a time, Stephanie? So let's, if I could have a motion to approve the February 27th meeting.
So moved.
A second? Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, just one minor edit on page 2 under a new business. The first item at the bottom of the first item, it says that I made a motion and seconded my own motion, which is
It's already
not
correct.
able to do.
We corrected
So
that, Brad.
the second reference might just be a committee member seconded the motion.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
actually
it's-
corrected that because Michael had actually seconded that, so that's been corrected. Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, and same with the March 27th.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any comments on this one?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Citizens' comments for agenda items. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mary Ann Conley from Seabrook. And I'm here today because on the agenda we have our charitable grants, and I'd like to speak to that if it's all right. Honorable Mayor and council members, there are many worthwhile organizations applying for charitable grants from the town of Kiowa. As I review the list of submittals, I see that only one addresses the needs of affordable housing for low to moderate income families, and that is Habitat for Humanity. In addition to building homes, the organization also has a strong repair program, which has helped many families, many of whom are at the poverty level or ineligible for federal or state programs. Inflation has caused a 40% increase in materials for home building, and the need for housing grows every day. As a result, I'm asking you to reconsider the $20,000 request and grant the full amount. Please understand that we do appreciate your generosity. Your consideration is deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Anyone else? Alex?
Alex Fernandez, 418 Snow Egret. I'm not here to talk about any grant. But I know that the chairman had requested that when a member makes a comment that you don't want any interchange or any answer to the question. So I need to ask a question with reference to the budget process. will we be allowed to ask questions during that process, later in your agenda? Or do you want me to ask my question now and then, I don't know if it'll be answered?
I would ask your question now, and then we'll address it when we get to the budget piece.
Okay,
How's
so
that?
my question is with reference to investment income. If you look at what I saw, by the way, I arrived here late, so there was no more copies. I understand there's a, pardon me? Oh, thank you, but I understand there's a green initiative and there's just so much paper that needs to be printed.
Go
so
ahead. Ask your question.
I agree. My question is with reference to investment income. If you look at the budget process, it says that in 2021, we achieved $30-some thousand. Again, I can't quote, I don't have the sheet in front of me. 2022 was $50-some thousand, and now in 2023, we're $1,100,000. So my question is, what has changed dramatically that our investment income, has changed? I know that our portfolio increased, but not, it hasn't quadrupled or in any of that size. So I'd like to know, details with reference of what has caused that enormous change in our investment income process.
Okay, we'll address that when we get to the budget process. We also, just as a reminder, Alex, I think in a previous meeting, when the issue of investment income came up, we said that we would kind of reassess where we were with that after we finished the budgeting process. So that's still on our agenda as a council to look at as soon as we're finished with this budget process. So, okay? Anyone else?
Good afternoon. Larry Woolahan, 406 Snow Egret Drive. I'd just like to, I'm a finance guy, I'm not one of these many lawyers we seem to have on the island. Just like to point out some numbers and then make a comment and a question. So our budget versus 22, our revenue is down 6%. Revenue excluding that 1 million interest income, which is actually 20 million or so cash times 4%, which we're getting currently, which equals $1 million. So we're down 12% excluding interest. Salaries forecast or budget 24 are up 23%. Salary costs, sorry, are up 23% versus 22. Salary benefits are up 40% versus 22. Consultants' costs are up 195% at 560,000 roughly versus 22. Then, apart from those headlines, costs are on their increase. The beach, the payment to the beach company for beach security, the beach patrol, went up from 28,000 about 14 months ago to 49,000 a month. And that was a contract which was no bid. This year, the same company which supplies our enforcement, our code enforcement in the evenings, has gone up from 24,000 a month, same company, to 32,000 a month. So costs are increasing significantly. Yes, our income is high, and that's fortuitous. Well, that's good. Will it continue? I don't know. But my question is, how do the council ensure we receive value for money? Also, talking about SATAX, which is part of the budget, I see that the payments to Freshfields are going up 85,000 versus 23. Freshfields are also being given 81,000 new this year for garden and gun, whatever that may be. My question is, can't we think of, I thought we were going to be more creative in our use, commercial, I shouldn't use the word creative as an accountant, more commercial in our use of SATAX. Kika, for example, issue hundreds of thousands of tourist passes. Do we pay anything to Kika out of SATAX? That's a tourist activity. We don't pay money to Kika. Kika needs money. Kika maintains the island, maintains the roads, tourists benefit. They come to Kika because it's beautiful. We don't give any money to Kika. But we are giving money for the first time this year to another K, which is the club, the beach club, we're giving them $75,000 for a 4-ball tournament taking place this month. That 4-ball tournament, do you know, I don't know how many visitors are likely to come. My guess is it's primarily golfers. Now, we do need golfers, but I'd like to point out that the 2 courses on which they're playing, and I know I'm taking too much time, I'll be quick, the 2 courses on which they're playing are not open to tourists. So I would just make the general comment that I know we have to spend SATAX within 2 years of receiving it, so it is difficult, but I think we can come up with better ways to spend the money. And I'm making a value judgment there. My value judgment might be different to yours. And actually, I've taken too much of your time, so I'll end it there. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Rob Keeler, 713 Glossiabus Lane on Kiowa. I just want to address the young lady from Seabrook. I agree 100%. Habitat does a fantastic job in the islands. They've even replaced 28 roofs recently, which has been a tremendous help, but they're not the only organization. I just want to make a correction. They're not the only organization working on low-income housing in the Sea Islands. So there's a group called the CHIP Ministry that was spun off of Johns Island Presbyterian Church, a small group. And since 2015, they've worked on over 100 homes on Johns and Wadmalaw Islands to repair low-income housing. So we work with Habitat on a number of these projects where they'll do a roof, we'll do the inside. Habitat won't go inside, we will. And so I just wanted to make a correction that Habitat's not the only one working in those areas. And so thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, thank you. So there is no old business. So we'll move on to the new business. So the first is to review and prepare for recommendation to Town Council the charitable grants funding. And just before we start that, let me just review a couple of things on the guidelines. So as we're talking through these elements, everybody keeps the proper frame of reference. So last year, when we started doing this, we said that we were going to change slightly our focus on these charitable grants, and that we would focus on programs that addressed hunger, housing, and health. And those were the three pillars that we would support. And then a couple of other things that we tried to say would be kind of our operating practices is that things that we did not want to necessarily support were what we call funding the funder. So we didn't want to give money to an organization that then decided what they did with their money. We wanted to go directly to whatever the receiving organization was. That was one. One was that the service area of whatever organization got the money, their primary service area needs to be Johns and Wadmalaw Islands. It doesn't mean that they can't service elsewhere, but their primary focus needs to be on those 2 islands. And then the last one that I'll point out is that we didn't want to fund what would be considered operating expenses, so rents and salaries and so forth. We wanted the money that we donated to be earmarked to go directly to the benefactors or the beneficiaries rather of the organization. So as we review these, just kind of keep those in mind, that that's what we're trying to accomplish. The other thing is that we have, I won't say arbitrarily, but we have decided that the amount of money that we're going to give away is a sum of $200,000. So while this year we had requests of 280-some thousand, you can't. This is the old 5-pound bag thing. So we want to keep it to 200,000. Now, if we decide that everybody is meritorious in terms of their ability, then we can make it 300,000 if we wanted to. But we're targeting a 200,000 limit. Okay. So are we going to do this like we did last year? Okay, so John, are you first? So the way we do this is we split these requests up amongst the staff, and they go out and do some due diligence on each of them, and to determine if they believe that the request is warranted, and if so, to what extent. 100% funding, maybe not quite so much, and so forth. And so we're going to do that review now. We'll take some notes, and then at the end, we'll decide how we want to approach it, okay?
Just wanted to highlight all the staff members who are part of the process here. And looking at our first set of organizations for charitable grants this year. First is Backpack Buddy Seabrook Island. Their particular request was in the amount of $5,000. Recommendation is to grant $5,000. This is a recurring recipient. Their particular project looks at directly servicing to the schools on Johns Island, Mount Zion, and St. John's High School by providing food care packages for those students in partnership with counselors through the community schools representative. And so that's a direct need directly to students. And I will go very overview of all the projects here. I won't. The second, Barrier Islands Free Medical Clinic. This is also a recurring recipient. Their particular request was in the amount of $25,000. The recommendation is to grant the full amount. Barrier Island Free Medical Clinic does provide care to low-income and uninsured adults who live and work across the area. And for this particular program, the request is in support of the Prevent and Protect program, which is for critical vaccination. The third request for this particular group, Barrier Island Little League, their request was in the amount of $6,500. They are a recurring recipient, and the recommendation is for $6,500. This particular organization's help with youth players. They serve over 480 youth players, ranging ages 4 to 14, and utilize a really substantial amount of volunteers to ensure that this program goes. The funding used will be to support their batting cages and upgrades, which allows them to maximize their service to children. Bridges of Hope, the next organization, is a recurring recipient.
Chairman, just a comment. I wholeheartedly support Little League Ball, but with hunger, housing, and health, should we either expand that or one umbrella would the Little League support fall under?
So that was a question that came up during the review process, and what we did was tag this to the health arena.
Okay.
For that particular reason of physical health, mental health, et cetera. Yeah.
That's fine, John.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to know. Okay.
Bridges of Hope, they are also a recurring recipient. Their particular request for 2023 was $2,500. The recommendation of $2,500 is being put forth. Bridges of Hope is an intervention program for children and youth to help them process and heal through grief. This particular funding will go towards programming for approximately 25 children and 10 guardians. A wonderful program. Charleston area senior citizens. This particular group has also a recurring recipient. Their particular request was in the amount of $18,301.50, and the recommendation for this year is $8,136. That recommendation is to be able to fund the service for clients on Johns and Monmouth Island. The difference there has been an increase in the amount of cost operations for food as well as delivery and driving services. And so the recommendation is to really focus on the actual preparation of the meals itself, not the staffing increase that was attributed to the increases that we've seen across general inflation.
So again, John, when you went through their request, the application, you were able to dissect. It's consistent with the policy.
Correct.
Okay. So this would go to what?
Hunger.
No, I'm sorry.
The meal preps.
The delta was operating expenses.
Yeah, so give me 1 second. I can. It's just the actual meals itself.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Charleston Area Therapeutic Riding, another recurring recipient. Their request in the amount of $7,084. Recommendation moving forward is $7,084. I think many of you are familiar with this organization, which provides usage for children with disabilities to partake in educational opportunities through therapeutic riding. Their facility on Johns Island programs a 12-week curriculum for those students. And this year, the particular class would be able to continue, which found very great benefits. This particular class, that's an extension of, if I'm correct, from last year, to be able to continue this particular curriculum for that special education classroom. The CHIP Ministry, Community Home Improvement, their particular request is an amount of $10,000. The recommendation moving forward is $8,000. There are a previous applicant that was not awarded previously some years ago. This organization does utilize volunteer labor to do repairs and upgrades to existing homes that are substandard or damaged. And this particular funding will go towards their list of homes to do those repairs and upgrades, which is about 10 to 12 homes. 100% of their donations go towards the materials and usage for the improvements of those repairs and upgrades.
So this is their first request?
So this is not their first request. I don't recall the actual year that they did apply, but they did apply previously. And the previous council at that time decided not to fund them because of their affiliation with the church.
But they don't just help church members' homes, nor anybody of a particular religion. It's any house that needs help.
Correct. The final group of our first team is Feeding of the Multitude. Their request was in the amount of $7,000. The recommendation is $5,000. They are a recurring recipient. This is an annual event that serves nearly 5,700 people. And this event has grown substantially over the years. They utilize and maximize a number of volunteers and churches on Johns and Wobble Island to make the event go. And this would go towards their funding needed for this upcoming Thanksgiving Day holiday.
But the event was held last year?
Yes.
All right, I am a team of one. Okay, let me just see here. Kiowa Women's Foundation, they are a recurring recipient. They requested $12,000, and we recommend funding of $12,000.
How about the one above it?
Sir?
How about the one above it?
Well,
Keeper of the Wildlife.
Keeper of the Wild.
okay, that was. Oh, we're not recommending. These are only funding recommendations.
So if we're not recommending, why are we not recommending that, any funding for that one?
Because it didn't fall under those three categories.
Okay,
It
All
didn't
right.
fall in one of the three categories.
gotcha. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Okay. Each week during the school years, our Backpack Buddy volunteers prepare approximately 300 bags filled with 12 protein-rich, shelf-stable foods, snacks for students selected by their school counselors. Our volunteers deliver the bags to Angel Oak and Frierson Elementary Schools and Hot Gap Middle School, where the counselors put the bags in the students' backpacks on Fridays to sustain them over the weekend. Kiowa Women's Foundation also sponsors a teen holiday project a hygiene project for 75 students at the middle school and high school, and co-sponsored the St. John's High School softball team.
Petra, how does the Backpack Buddies funding here differentiate? How is it differentiated from the Backpack Buddies Seabrook Island funding in line 1?
Okay, they are not associated with Backpack Buddies. Okay, this was actually something that the Kiowa Women's Foundation actually wrote, because I gave them that opportunity, but they are not part of the, under the big name of Backpack Buddies. They are all volunteers. They are all Kiowa residents that volunteer. They also do, Backpack Buddies in Seabrook does a different schools than these people do.
Thank you.
Petra, maybe I missed this. So we don't have a line item for Backpack Buddies. It falls under the Kiowa Women's Foundation now? Is that?
We have one for the Seabrook that's Backpack.
No.
Okay,
I know that.
Kiowa Women's Foundation is not does not go under the name of Backpack Buddies. Okay, is there anybody here from?
They have a similar concept, but
They
it's
have
just
the
not,
same,
it's
there
not
we go,
branded the
same
same, it's not branded the
concept,
same way.
same concept, but they are not part of Backpack Buddies.
No, right. But once upon a time, we used to have Backpack Buddies here on Kiowa. Does it fall under
That's Kiowa Women's Foundation, is it not? Didn't it change?
Wait. So do you operate under the Backpack Buddies brand?
No.
Backpack Buddies is nationwide. We don't report up to them. We run it ourselves. I'm sitting with my Seabrook counterpart. We're very friendly. We do different schools. We do 3 schools. They do 3 schools.
Okay.
I got it.
Sorry, I missed that the Backpack fell under Kiowa.
You want me to go up there?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
All right, press on.
Press on. Okay, Low Country Food Bank. They're requesting $10,000, and we are recommending $10,000.
So, excuse me, go back to the one above it where we didn't do anything. Why did we not do anything on that one?
What's up there?
Cyril Istikov Ministries?
Okay, the reason that the group decided not to was they don't have a defined, there's no segregation of the funds from their total income.
So you couldn't attribute 5,000 toward a specific targeted?
Well, the way, if you look in their application, the way they've got it in their application is they've got the total funds that the 501c3 gets in. And if you look at that versus how much actually is used for their programs, there's a great difference there. There's only probably about 12% that goes to these funding projects. But what they've done is the whole 501c3, they get all their money that they live on and have expenses in that amount.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay,
Right.
so it was hard to differentiate, and even though we were able to get her to kind of break out, there's still not a defined segregation of the money.
I got it.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, Low Country Food Bank. Uh-oh, wrong one. Okay, nearly 80% of children attending public schools on Johns and Waimea Islands qualify for free or reduced school meals. For many children, the food they receive in the National School Lunch Program is most, if not all, of the nutritious food they have to eat. With the funding, Low Country Food Bank will be able to fill in the gaps for meals during the summer, at night, and on weekends for more than 200 families with a distribution of nutritious food, including fresh produce, and conducting summer pop-up distributions, and those would be between May and August of '23.
So this food is incremental to what is supplied by the Kiowa Women's Foundation and the Backpack Buddies?
No,
This is different?
this is done during the summer.
Oh, not during the school year. I got you.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Very important.
Okay, New Webster.
Wait.
Oh,
Made with
The ones that you're not giving any money to, don't skip them. Kind of explain why you're not
okay,
giving any.
we just never have. And they're not in my
didn't do this
slides,
last
so I
year.
don't know. Okay, which is next? Made with Love. Okay, Made with Love is part of the Kiowa Women's Kiowa, gosh. What is it? Kika Cares.
Yeah.
Okay. Our policy is not to fund the funder, but in this case, the Made with Love program it falls under the foundation, but is not a separate program, doesn't have its own accounting. Therefore, if we would fund this, we would actually be writing the check out to the foundation.
Okay, so it's a fund the funder thing is really.
Kind
what
of,
I'm saying.
yeah.
Okay,
We
all right.
do have other programs that fall under foundation, but they are totally separate. They have their own accounts, their own accounting.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, the New Webster Food Pantry provides a hand up, not a handout. The project strives to eliminate excessive hunger on Johns and Wadmalaw Islands in a meaningful and dignified manner by providing food to needy and hurting people to survive and become self-sufficient. They promote the value of healthy nutrition, provide how-to food preparation for unfamiliar foods, distribute encouraging notes on how to save money, and share community information flyer on employment opportunities in the community. The pantry serves an average of 116 families consisting of 9,812 persons annually. We good?
Yeah.
Thank you. There you go.
You got it. Okay. Okay, this is a reoccurring recipient. They requested $10,000. We recommended $10,000. The organization's mission is to help people remain in their homes by increasing safety and accessibility, critical home repairs, roofs, by repairing roofs, floors, and ramps. The Kiowa grant will fund the critical home repairs and heat and cool relief programs for Johns Island, Wadmalaw families on the organization's wait list. Next one is Operation Site. They requested $7,000. We recommended $7,000. Surgery for uninsured Johns or Wadmalaw Island residents suffering from cataracts or urgent sight-threatening renal disorders by providing free surgical care to prevent blindness. Operation Sight works directly with operable cataract patients ages 18 to 63 that have an income at below 200% poverty level and are uninsured, who do not qualify for any other service models, making Operation Sight their last option. Funding will provide surgeries to restore sight for 5 to 7 Johns Island and Wadmalaw residents on this program's waiting list.
Jan, where do they do the surgery?
I'm sorry?
Where do they do the surgery?
They actually have places that they go around that people allow them to use their facilities, and also the doctors do it as a volunteer type thing.
Dr. Carrie Solomon.
Yeah.
So the physicians are volunteers. This goes to the hospital?
They,
Goes to his office.
yeah.
I'm here, can answer any of
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
those. Sorry for interrupting.
That's okay.
Most of the surgeries are done at Trident in the North Charleston area or at Carolina Eye Care's Physicians Eye Surgery Center in West Ashley. However, the doctors offices. All of our doctors volunteer. We have 11 volunteers. They are around the Low Country area from Beaufort to Moncks Corner and up to Somerville. So our patients have options for their appointment locations.
You bill Medicaid?
Pardon?
You bill Medicaid?
We do not work with Medicaid patients. Patients that are, pardon?
Okay, so these patients aren't even eligible
For Medicaid or Medicare. If they do have one of those options, we do refer them to Lions Visions. We have a great partnership with them.
Who provides transportation?
They often have to have a family member or friend, especially after surgery. It's important that they are driven home by somebody that they feel comfortable with.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So the next one we have is community outreach. They requested $30,000. We recommended $30,000. The core mission support our, let me get that up there. Our Lady of Mercy community outreach programs that provide basic and emergency resources, education, health, and wellness programs for residents of James, Johns, and Wadmalaw Island who lack insurance and are in poverty while guiding towards self-sufficiency. Funding requests to support various direct service programs. They have a number of programs at their facility to help guide folks in the right direction. Next one. Sea Island Blessing Basket, they requested $20,000. We recommended $20,000. The Sea Island Blessing Baskets is a community outreach food distribution program that provides nutritious, desirable food baskets once a month to low-income families on Johns Island and Wadmalaw Island. The number of program enrollees has consistently increased annually each year. The organization has felt the increase in food costs due to inflation. It takes around $12,000 a month to sustain the program. The Kiowa grant will help fund the Blessing Basket program for almost 2 months. The next one we have is Sea Island Habitat for Humanity requested $20,000. We recommended $15,000. The Sea Island Habitat Home for Humanity, the Sea Island Habitat Home for Humanity Critical Repair Program provides critical repairs to existing homes on Johns and Wadmalaw Island whose owners live at or below a poverty level. Repairs are primarily for weatherization, security, and safety, roofs, windows, doors, repairs, accessibility issues, including stairs, handrails, and ramp installation. The Kiowa grant will help build a house for a Johns Island resident on her family's land her current home is inhabitable.
Jan, I'm sorry, Shirley, how large is your population that you feed? The Blessing Baskets? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, can I go back to the Habitat for Humanity?
It's a month or about 700 individuals.
Wow, 300.
Okay, so Brad, you had a
I'm
comment
sorry,
on Habitat?
Mr. Bell?
Yeah, the question was, in the other instances in which the staff recommendation was less than the requested amount, there was a specific reason given. Is there a reason in this particular instance why the recommended amount is less than the requested amount?
Well, no, it was just a different program than they have applied for past. It's kind of a new thing that they're doing. No, but repairs. In the past, it was repairs. Okay, yeah. No, sir.
So Brad, if it sounds like the reason was they were getting close to the 200,000 and they had to squeeze somewhere.
I see the math on that, yes. Whether it should, question, I guess, is whether it should all come out of Sea Island Habitat Communities request, or be kind of prorated or spread a little bit more evenly. I guess that's the only comment.
What Dorota just said too was that if the sense was that the program would continue, even if we reduced the amount, then they felt a little more comfortable reducing it. But kind of hold that thought a minute, Brad, till we get to the end, because I have a suggestion on that one as well as a couple of others.
Okay.
Okay. All right, the next one we have is the St. James Bethel African Methodist. Oh, okay. The AME Church requested $3,500, and we recommended $3,000. The church's food pantry program distributes groceries to individuals on Wadmalaw and Johns Island. The program has been in existence since 1998. The recipients drive or are brought to church for pickup of groceries on the second and fourth Wednesdays of each month. The program supports 103 households and 14 emergency distributions annually. The Kiowa grant will help with this program continue to be able to serve the Johns Island and Wadmalaw residents that depend on it monthly.
And there's different accounting on this one, so you can specifically identify that the monies that would be provided would go only to the food pantry?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. The next one is the Paraclete Foundation of the Holy Spirit Catholic Church requested $12,000. We recommended $8,000. They are also a reoccurring recipient. The foundation mission is to assist the poor within the boundaries of the Holy Spirit Parish, Johns Island, Wadmalaw, to repair and upgrade homes that are deteriorating condition affecting safety and sanitation, roof repairs, handicap accessible ramps, bathrooms, unsafe stairs, and flooring. Volunteers provide 8% of the labor, except in cases where the extensive roof is required. Funding will help complete 3 badly leaking roofs.
So how do they determine their client base?
They have it vent. They actually have connections with Water Wellness, and anybody that goes out and does work and they see a home that needs to be taken care of, and they'll as long as the owners own the homes, they will.
So even though their area of concentration is the parish, they're not limited to being in the parish to be a recipient.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the next one we have is the Progressive Club of Johns Island. This is a new recipient. They requested $48,500. We recommended $10,000. Founded in 1948, the Progressive Club is certificate in a role as a citizenship school and is associated with events and persons important to the civil rights movement. The program seeks to extend its sources to provide all people with the understanding of shared history, to provide services to the neighbors, and become a vital source in the Sea Island communities. The funding will help provide a pavilion along with walking trail that visitors can use to rest, relax, and share, and I'm lost my place. Okay, the pavilion will be used for community gatherings like cookouts, oyster roasts, civic meetings, and educational lectures. And that's it.
I have a question to the last
Yes, sir.
one. So when I was reading the details, it made me think that the money they are requesting is not going to be spent within the next 12 months, which I thought was a requirement.
What they're looking for, I think we have somebody here from, no? I think they're going to use this.
Wait, over here.
Oh, there she is. You want to come up here, honey?
Oh.
Oh, okay, you can stay there.
Well, what it is we're trying to do, we have property that you get to see, and we have a trail that's already and we would like to enhance the trail as well as put a covered place a covered pavilion there, so we can get to stay on it, as well as we'll have a discussion trail with our information regarding what actually happened on this night where they had 6 schools. What would help African American run out and at that point learn to read and it has ways of teach them how to do that. Here comes that.
So
will be utilized in, yes, it will be utilized within a year's time.
Within a year.
We will do that.
Where is your walking trail?
On River.
Is it by the?
Not from my elementary school.
South of River Road near Mount Zion School.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is it the one that picks up from back here? Oh, further up. I thought that was a walking.
No, it's on River.
So I have a couple of comments about these. Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, in keeping with our idea that hunger, housing, and health are the predominant things that we support, you know, I go back to what the mayor said about the Little League. You know, I'm a huge supporter of Little League, and you know, most of us have participated in Little League in our younger years. But I just don't, if what they're trying to do is to build a better batting cage, so I don't know how that meets our criteria. That's one. The other one that I have a little bit of a problem with is actually this last one, the Progressive Club, as an important aspect as it was to the history of Johns Island and the civil rights movement and all of that. I don't know that what they want to do with this application meets our requirements for hunger, housing, and health. And so, Brad, going back to your comment about the housing, it would seem to me that if we took the $16,000 that's available from those 2 applications and spread it differently, we could fully fund the ones that are directly related to housing and housing repairs and roofing and all of that, and still be within our $200,000 limit. So, you know, I would suggest maybe that we move some of that money and add 2,000 back to the CHIP ministry, add the 2,000 back to the Feeding the Multitude, where we took 2 out of that. Go ahead and add $4,000 or $5,000 back to the Habitat, and the 500 back to the St. James Bethel AME Church. I think that we could better use those funds to directly impact food and so forth.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I generally agree with everything you said, at least directionally. The one concern I have, and I think this is mostly an accounting issue, I just think we need to be very mindful of when you are providing funding support to any faith-based organization. There is a constitutional prescription to separate church and state, and given that money is fungible, I just think we need to be extra careful to ensure that any monies provided to a faith-based organization are provided in a sense directly to programmatic activities, and however otherwise worthy, not the proselytizing or the faith mission of the entity.
Yeah, you're right, Brad, and I think we do, typically we do that due diligence in terms of examining who it is that benefits from the programs and how they're administered, but you're right, we need to be sure that we do that appropriately. Now, there are 3 people that want to speak on topics where there was no funding, so if you guys want to. Sure. Come to the podium and state your name and what the program is so that we can have it on the record.
My name is Mary Bull, and I'm with the Little League Baseball. So the reason we asked for this money was because baseball has grown so much on Johns Island. We currently have 35 baseball teams, 7 softball teams, and we now have 5 junior, which is ages 14 through 17. We have nowhere for them to play. We have 3 fields. We're playing 6 days a week from 5:30 to 9 p.m. every day, and all day on Saturdays to accommodate all these children. We have a batting cage. With these improvements, we could put 2 teams on that batting cage 5 days a week and all day on Saturday where they could have practices. We can't do that now. It's important to us to keep the kids moving and having fun and learning, which is why we've asked for this money. And that is the exact cost, minus the cost of the volunteers to install everything.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angelina Istatkova with Kirill Istatkov Ministries. And the reason we applied for this grant was that our ministry and our organization is specifically helping Frierson Elementary School on Wadmala Island, where our daughter is a 4th and 5th grade teacher. And what we did last year and we want to do this year is providing uniform clothes for the students. Last year, we actually fully clothed 40 students with new clothes for the beginning of the new school year, also with sports shoes. So they're children that we can see firsthand are needing these uniforms. Many low-income families have multiple children in this same school, and it was tremendous help to provide these uniforms. So these are generic brands of polo shirts, khakis, shorts, and tennis shoes. This year, the need is even bigger. We are planning to actually clothe fully 60 students. So this is the primary reason we want to spend these funds. Along with that, we provide lunch for the teachers once a month at Frierson Elementary, and this is between 35 and 40 teachers. We provide them the food. Sometimes they cook at the place. Sometimes we just bring the lunch for them. It's very appreciative. The reason why we were not recommended, it was mentioned earlier, was that the funds that the ministry is receiving annually goes to different other projects, salaries, and other expenses, which is understandable. It's a faith-based ministry, but the charitable activities that we do during the year are also connected with alleviating the poverty in Wadmala, because we also provide food for seniors, something that we maybe other organizations do the same, but specifically for the children, for the students, this is something that we're going to continue to do. This last year, we had $11,000 from the funds that came through fundraisers to make these projects possible. And this is our first year requesting from Town of Kiowa to support us with a grant. That's why you saw that there is like funds that go for other reasons. And I understand when you mention to have distinct actually line between the funds that come to sponsor the salaries, but also for the charitable events. And I think that this is clear in our financial report that we provided. Any help in this moment, we requested $5,000, but the children project for the uniforms cost $2,000. That's going to help a lot to fulfill this year. Thank you so much in advance.
All right, anyone else? One more? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Elizabeth St. John, and I live on Kiowa Island. We've lived here for 13 years. And the reason we came to Kiowa is because my dear friend Joanne Ruggieri invited us, and my husband and I, at the end of the weekend, I told him, I said, leave me here, buy me a kayak, buy me a bike, and come back and get me in 5 years. We had come up from Hilton Head because Hilton Head got paved over. And when we first went to Hilton Head, it was 6 restaurants, including McDonald's, and a lot of beautiful nature, and that's what we loved. So we came to Kiowa for the nature. And this is what we see on the front page of every publication, whether it's the Kiowa Conservancy, the Kika, everything here is about shorebird stewardship and about the animals, and that's what we love about Kiowa. So my it's not an argument, not an ugly argument, but my argument would be, when we did the presentation to you on Keeper of the Wild, we met a lot of filters, as we say today, since we all work on the internet, in the health capacity. If you look at the upcoming Island Connection article, you see the joy on the faces. These are two of the representatives of the aquarium who were at Earth Day, and they are smiling and laughing at this very adorable demonstrating animal that we have, because she can't be released into the wild, and it's a blind and albino opossum. So we use her to teach children and to teach people about the functionality of these animals. We are all part of a circle of life, and you cannot take any species out without severe damage and consequence to the other. Possums eat ticks, and we're talking about children who live in less than desirable conditions. They're outside a lot, and they're going to be exposed to ticks and cockroaches and all those things. Well, if you have a possum around the house, he's going to keep your yard clean. You know, the raccoons, the possums eat carrion. If we didn't have possums, and then also the raptors who clean up the environment, and the cacaws, we would have disease rampant on these islands. So I would like you to reconsider our application. First of all, before I tell you my filters here, I would like to point out that in 40 years, when Janet Kinzer first started this rescue operation, she has never drawn one penny from the funds that we have. Our little teeny tiny budget for this operation, and we run about 4,000 rescues a year that we put back into the environment in a healthy location, a healthy animal. We, last year, I think the budget was $210,000, and that includes 3 1099 employees, simply because there is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation that has to be safe, and we can't do that with only volunteers. We have to have some employees that are paid, and I'll tell you this, the women who do this work are so passionate that when I first met them, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe they could be so employed and still so immersed and so passionate in their work. But I would say that if you look at the pictures that I put here with the article, it'll come out May 5th. You see the mental health that you derive from the joy of dealing with an animal that is defenseless, and you can help put it back into its work in the environment. The raccoons and these animals swim out to sandbanks, and when they defecate, they put seeds out there. That's what enables sandbanks to become islands. Or in case of hurricanes, when whole area has been washed out, these animals help to reseed. The beaver are essential to the environment. They keep the waterways clean, even though we tend to think that they obstruct the waterways, but they have their other functions. And, we have so many benefits from the squirrels that plant trees all over the place. They bury their little nuts and forget where they are, just like I forget things. And then in the spring, you have a new little live oak coming up in an area, or a pine tree in an area that might have been burned by fire and needs new regrowth, or the oxeye daisy, same thing. So I would ask you that you reconsider our appeal. We need some money for our pre-release area. And our pre-release area is where the animals, once they've been rehabbed, once they're healthy again, get back accustomed to the wild. So we put them in an area that's outside but still protected. And actually at one point they can go out a pipe and come back in a pipe at night, like, let's go home for dinner, kind of thing. And then one day they leave.
We understand.
Yes, sir.
So I don't want to cut you off, but I'm going to cut you off because we have a lot of stuff to do today, and we understand your point. So my opinion is that it's still somewhat outside of the boundaries of what it is we've chosen as a community to support directly. I'm not saying that what you do isn't worthwhile. I just don't think it's something that we would necessarily support in our operating practices of maintaining the notion of these 3 H's. So, I mean, somebody else may have a different opinion.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. Your suggestion about the 2 items, item 3 and item 22, is worth $16,500. The delta in terms of the items that we either didn't approve or we approved less is $43,000. So we really don't even come close to making a dent necessarily in the items that weren't approved. If you reduce item 3 by $3,500 and reduce item 22 by $5,000, you can have $8,500 available.
That, in my opinion, would go toward more fully funding the housing pieces.
Absolutely. So that was the extent of my arithmetic.
Yeah. No,
wherever you think it would be most likely, but I don't think I would take away total funding for those 2. But then, again, you have $8,500 to...
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, any comments on reallocation of some of these grants?
Not specifically, just a little bit generally in trying to do the math as well. I might respectively not disagree, but offer a slightly different perspective on the mayor's comments, and that we made the conscious decision, or the staff recommendation was not to fund 3 of the requests because, in part, either there were allocation issues and or they didn't fit our criteria. To the extent that we conclude that, Barry Iron Little League, however meritorious, and I agree completely that, I think it is something that's worthwhile. If it doesn't meet our criteria, then I guess my view would be, unless we change our criteria, that should be no monies given. Unfortunately, just like no monies were given to certain other requests. And probably the same thing with Progressive Club of Johns Island, unless we have some clarity about how that money will be used and when it will be used and whether that fits in with housing, hunger, or health. I don't have a particular solution for how you would allocate whatever monies are freed up. You could do a pro rata, or we could just make a judgment call here to fully fund Habitat for Humanity and 1 or 2 others. That's all.
So I agree with what Brad said. If you took those 2 out, that's $16,500. Call it $16,000 for ease of math. And you said that you end up putting, fully funding the CHIP ministry and feeding the multitudes, and a fair amount to fund the difference in the Habitat, and then a fair amount in the Paraclete Foundation, then you can certainly reallocate that $16,000 into those 4 areas and stick pretty closely with our guidelines of focusing on hunger, housing, and health. So I would say my opinion is that we do that, and we let the staff go back and reallocate that money across ones that are specifically hunger, housing, and health, that we reduce those 2 and use that $16,000 to address the other ones. Yes?
Excuse me, there's a young lady here itching to speak, I think. Your hand 3 times.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I have more of a question about a procedural question, and I think, I'm so sorry, the gentleman that's on the screen had asked. So some of the ones, my name is Mary Helen Swift. I'm here from Feeding the Multitude. We did not get fully funded, and we are so grateful for any monies that we get. How was it determined, he had mentioned prorating. How was it determined that Habitat got $5,000 less? Feeding the Multitude got $2,000 less. CHIPS got $2,000, because it's not really a prorated. And then there were 2 different food pantries on here. One was fully funded and one wasn't. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand, this is my first meeting like this. How does that work? How is it determined that one food pantry gets fully funded and one pantry doesn't, and how the amounts for the ones that are not fully funded but were approved, how does that work? I'm trying to understand.
That's a great question. I've had that question for about a year and a half. And I think it's not an overly scientific thing. I think it has to do with partially the staff group that's responsible for that group of charities, and also the volume of money and our history with that particular organization. Don't try and figure out how scientifically it's done, because I don't think there's a lot of science behind it. And that's why I'm suggesting if we take ones that in our opinion are clearly outside of the boundaries of what our targets are, then we can fully fund almost all of the rest of them. And that, to me, that would make more sense.
Sometimes there's some math to it, but a lot of times there's not.
Yeah.
There's times where we're able to, as part of the selection committee, there are times where we were able to boil down the cost per person. And then we look and see, for instance, if there was someone for exam, we subtract that out, and you look for the out. So some calculations we can narrow it down to the islands, some
It's a number. So, go back to, did that at least attempt to answer? So, again, yes, what do you mean? So, I guess I go back to the suggestion that we take these two and make use of the $16,000. What? The Progressive Club. And have the staff reallocate those dollars to these either feeding or home repair programs to get them as close to being fully funded as possible. And that keeps the money being used most, in my opinion, most directly for hunger, housing, and health. Brad, what do you think of that idea?
I think that is fine. In fact, you could, I mean, with the exception, because the big delta is, I think, which one? Senior services, 10,000 gap. But for that one, and there may be some specific, I can't recall the specific reasons on that one, but I thought they were valid at the time and I was hearing them, is you could actually fully fund all of the remaining items.
Yep.
Okay, before we get too excited about shifting money around, I'm still a little puzzled. You know, when I look at our grant guidelines, for example, under limitations, we clearly state, which I think is correct as a municipality, that we cannot grant proceeds to organizations that provide or have a focus or a mission of religious instruction, proselytizing, or preaching. Now, at least we have two on the list that have that clearly in their mission statement. The purpose of what they are doing and what they are focusing on and what they want the money for, I think it's all, you know, very admirable, but it does not fit with the guidelines we have put in front of us ourselves.
And I guess you'd have to say if a church has a feeding program where they make available a food pantry, and it's available to anybody that needs to come to the food pantry, then they're not doing any of the religious instruction.
That's correct, but I'm explicitly referring to two organizations that are applying for money that we have not put on the no list.
What are those two?
One of them that are saying, you know, they want to focus on, you know, providing nourishment, which is perfectly fine with me, through food, but also spiritual connection and Christian fellowship, and that's where my problem starts.
And what is that?
That would be the feeding on of the multitude, and then the Kirill also we already excluded because they stated in the documents that their mission is to evangelize. I'm sorry for that. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Again, close to my heart, but not matching up with our own requirements. Other church organizations like AME or Our Lady of Mercy, you know, of course, also, you know, religious organizations, but I mean, in their application, it is clearly stated how they're going to use the money, independent from, you know, any religious race, color, whatever, as long as it's a person in need, and that's very close to me. If it crosses over into something that we have set ourselves as a rule not to do, that's where I have problems.
Okay.
As a municipality, not as an individual, of course, but I think for us as a municipality, and Brad, I think you also made that comment in the very beginning. I think we need to be watchful where we are potentially crossing the line.
So how about this as an approach? If we take the approach of taking the line number 3 and line number 22, those dollars, and we reallocate to these other pieces where we could fully fund the feeding or housing programs, and where there is that possible connection, we at least vet them to understand how they do the accounting so that if somebody gets a bag of groceries, they're also not getting proselytized.
Yeah. Well, and it goes further. So, for example, when I look at the CHIP ministry, I'm again very grateful for their organization, but also here as a town, I think we need to make sure that the money we give them is not only distributed to members of their own congregation.
And I think think it's not, right?
And I heard you saying it. I wasn't reading it. That's why I'm making the comment.
Are part of our church.
So that's maybe something that's also missing in our guidelines, to be maybe a little bit more explicit, so that also the organizations know what we expect.
So let me say, I mean, I'm cognizant of the time that we're going to be here today. Can we ask the staff to go back, eliminate those 2, and reallocate the balance? And then we've got to talk about this tomorrow at the town council meeting, and then we recommend that to council.
So which ones are you taking off? Because I have a different numbering here. I have a different numbering. Mine start with 4, not with 1. So
I have Berry Island Little League and the Progressive Club of Johns Island not to fund those, but then look at potentially make a recommendation for CHIP Ministry, Feeding the Multitude, Sea Island Habitat for Humanity, in the
Paraclete Foundation.
Well, John,
Paraclete Foundation of the Holy Spirit Catholic Church. So I just have looking at those 4.
I think this young lady made an interesting comment, and it's been striking me. We talk about hunger, housing, and health. It seems like the rubric that falls a little bit of confusion is health. Hunger is pretty straightforward, and housing is pretty straightforward. I guess I'm hung up on that. I think the efforts towards Little League and the efforts towards the Progressive Club are for 2 hugely important populations.
So take half of the money back.
Well, that was what I suggested. But be that as it may, I would ask that, getting back to her point, that we not categorize, but we summarize these under hunger, housing, and health, so we can see all the ones that we're funding for housing. We can see, it gets a little bit, now we've got 22 here, so it's hard to pick it out. Because at the end of the day, we may find out that we're woefully inadequate on one or inadequate on another. So I would just ask that, if it's even possible, just to reorganize these under those 3 categories, because it's, and like I said before, it's health it's the one that becomes a little bit, that's the umbrella that I think is a little bit more difficult to
certainly a gray area
clearly define. So maybe tomorrow then we can.
So, Mr. Mayor, just for staff, because of course, as we're turning this around in less than 24 hours, you're wanting to be able to, which we can do, recategorize the 22 under the 3 H's. In addition, are you still wanting us to look at?
Let's don't change any of the amounts.
Don't change the amounts.
Let's recategorize
okay.
them, and we can change the amounts tomorrow.
So the recommendation to town council would be to keep this.
Keep this as it is.
And then town council tomorrow can make.
But I think Michael's point's well taken, that if it isn't in the mission statement, that it truly is for the broader population than just their own ministry.
Yeah, but I think we're not, as staff, we're not changing our recommendation. That'll be something that town council, you guys have to discuss.
I think we can talk about that tomorrow.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. So the instruction then is to take this list, we'll recommend it to town council in the amounts that are on here. Staff will categorize it into those 3 areas. And then tomorrow we'll we'll decide what we want to do. Is that, do I need a motion to do that?
I think the gentleman has a.
Yes, sir.
How did y'all come up with hunger, housing, and health as being the three areas? Or did y'all come?
We did it last year during this
Parker.
process, or year before last.
Dr. Parker was on and how he kind of came up with 3H.
Yeah, I don't recall all the details, but it was felt like that of the money that we have available to us, that if we focus on those three areas, that we can help the most people in the Johns Island, Wadmalaw areas. That's how.
Well, I think, you know, being a citizen of the island or whatever, wildlife is a very significant part.
No, we get that. We understand that. We understand that. And
Kiowa Island is known for wildlife.
That's right.
We're asking for a little bit of money to help the wildlife.
Yep.
More money to help you.
Yep. Okay. So I make a motion that the amount stay the same for now, that the staff re-sequences these and groups them into each of those three areas, and that's what's presented to council tomorrow. That would be my motion.
Including a column where the staff's recommendation is included.
Yeah.
Because that's missing in my documents.
Yep.
That's fine. Sir, it was just
Well,
a
add
very-
another column with the amounts that staff has recommended. Because I only see what was awarded and what is requested. Oh, okay. Yeah, I look at the big book.
So do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just want to respond to this gentleman's question. It's a very emotional discussion. You know, we had our druthers, it would be 200,000, it would be 300,000, it would be 400,000, it would be, just keep going up. There's so much need. We spent a great deal of time on it, was it last year or the year before last, and we tried to create umbrellas, tried to create broad categories that we had more requests than these 22 that they could fall under. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what we kind of zeroed in on, hunger, housing, and health. And that's what we did. I can't say as though it was more scientific. It wasn't to the exclusion of anything. It wasn't as though, but especially in terms of, quite frankly, hunger and housing. I mean, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, we also, when we did that, we also eliminated arts and education because it didn't fall into those three that we really wanted to focus our attention on. So,
okay.
Hang on, let's take this. Everybody, all in favor of this motion?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Sure.
Since this money comes from taxes that are collected at pool,
No, not.
Would it be fair to ask that the pool have the input?
This money doesn't really come from taxes.
Well, it comes from here, right? From all of us who live on.
Yeah, it comes from business. Yep.
Would it be unfair to ask that we all give our input?
I think it's not unfair, and you're welcome to give your input. It's just sometimes everybody's not going to get everything they want, and that's the problem.
I understand. Last year y'all gave us one. This year we're not getting any, and that's for my charity.
We haven't decided that.
Yeah, we haven't.
Well, we haven't decided. We haven't made that final decision yet. Right? I mean, we received the input from the staff. My understanding is that the final numbers we put into these different 22 applications, we decide tomorrow.
And tomorrow we'll decide, yep.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Isn't there some way that we on Kiowa could say we would like to have a broader spectrum of gifting? I mean, it's a very generous thing that you're doing. Arbitrarily, last year, somebody came up with the HHH program, which sounds very nice. But that did cut out the arts, it did cut out the other things. I mean, is there a way for us on Kiowa to?
There is, ma'am. Honest to God, there is. And you elect us. And we use our best judgment to make these types of decisions. We have a fiduciary responsibility in terms of how we spend the town's money. It's not our money, how we're spending the town's money. So everybody has their input come election time and who you put up here. We have a budgeting process that goes through. We publicize the budgeting process. We're going to go talk about it this afternoon. you know, $200,000 is what we have line item. Too much, too little? I mean, everything is discretionary in the sense until we vote on it, until we say this is what we think. And we're your elected officials. I don't know what else to say. We can't put these types of things out for, we don't deal by referendum, I think is what you're implying. And we really don't. We don't put the budget out for referendum. We don't put these decisions out for referendum. And we make a lot of decisions that affect a lot of people and a lot of things, ordinances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but that's what everybody does.
So, John,
Okay, let's,
I would like to make one, or ask one more question in this respect, John, because this was for my time. So when we came up with these guidelines, that I have no problem with the way they are, except with the religious topic that maybe needs a little tweaking, and maybe explaining a little bit better what health really means. Aside from this, I think it's general, an acceptable guideline. How was this created? Was this just done by town council? Were a community involved in this? Was there a reading? So how did that?
It was basically a result of a meeting very similar to this, where we had a wide array of opinions voiced, and at one point in the meeting, Scott Parker said, you know, I think we need to somewhat limit our areas of focus. And he said, here's a suggestion. And his suggestion was these 3 H's. And we talked about it for a while, and we decided that that was probably the best alternative when you have limited funds to address a huge array of possible recipients. And that's how it was.
But there was no explicit then community involvement, that we put this together, this 1.5 pages, and then put it out to the community to comment on.
We didn't put this
because
out
I'm asking because she's not the only one that has mentioned this topic of should we prioritize maybe a little bit more what is really remaining on Kiowa versus other islands, et cetera.
Maybe, but I think that we could talk about this until this time tomorrow. And at the end of the day, we have a set of guidelines. If we need to change the guidelines, at some point we'll change the guidelines, maybe tomorrow. But I think the bottom line is we've got a set of guidelines, and we have limited funds that we've decided are appropriate for this piece, and we distribute it as best we can.
Equally, Michael, you know, once upon a time it was less than $200,000, and we increased it to $200,000.
I saw that. Yeah.
I mean, we could talk. We could send out to the community.
And I know we need to move on, but just quickly, historically, too, the way that this process started when I came on board is that we had applicants from arts to education to health, hunger, et cetera, essentially just came to Ways and Means, and they all presented. Conservancy, and essentially the Ways and Means Committee just sat down and tried to hammer it out. Probably over the last 4 years or so, the idea became let staff kind of vet it and present it. The conversation also came in regards to this vast amount of different applications coming before us, was that, for instance, the symphony, we used to fund that, and the question became, they're asking for 30 or 40,000, we only have 150. What is it that we really, as the town, wanted to look at funding? And that's how they essentially start chipping away at really trying to determine what they will like. They felt like through Kiowa communities proper, there's a lot of individuals that's very charitable and that they're giving to these various organizations. Again, it was Arts, et cetera, had came, the Gibbs Museum, the Charleston Symphony, and when you just add sometimes those 2 or 3 or 4 organizations, collectively they were asking for maybe 75 or 80,000, and we were only given 150. So then that's how we got here to where we're at today with the 3 H's.
Perfectly fine.
Stephanie, just following up on that and Michael's question, I guess on a go-forward basis, and I have no problem that this year the priority was hunger, housing, and health. However, we've defined that. But the question is, this is for 2023. At what point is a decision going to be made so other organizations are aware going forward what the opportunities might be as to whether the 3H's will be also, they will be the same in 2024, or we might have a process for evaluating whether there will be slightly different priorities or expanded or narrower set of priorities in 2024.
Well, when we advertise for applications, we put the guidelines out there as to what they are, and if we change the guidelines, we'll put those out there.
What will be ideal, I think, is like last year when the discussion happened, when it occurred, we knew staff's direction, yes, ultimately we have to put that out. But if we're making changes, the organizations that's applying for it, I think they will, like, for instance, the arts community, they're not looking at our grant applications anymore because they realize we're not going to fund it. If that's something you all like to change, then we would like to have that information sooner rather than later, because then when we put this out, I believe in December, January, in December, we can then either re-advertise that we're now looking beyond the 3H's and these are the different funding things that we're going to look at this year. But if you're looking to change it, which is a council's decision, we would just like to be able to have that information so we can push it out.
We need to move on. Okay, so let's move to the next topic, because like I said, we could talk about this till tomorrow. And we will talk about it tomorrow. So the next item on the agenda is the review and recommendation of Town Council for approval of the SATEX recommended amounts. So in your book, you've got two sheets. You've got one that is an additional, I'll keep going. So the first sheet is a recommendation for an addition of this year's allocation of funds, and that's the U.S. Amateur Floorball Championship, the $75,000. The second sheet is the sheet for the next year's SATEX funding money, and we do this allocation twice. We do it now, and then based on the revenue that we receive in the first 2 quarters, we come back in November and do it a second time for the additional funds if we are getting more funds. And based on a discussion I had with Dorota, we probably are going to have more. So it'll be a second pass, not necessarily for the same applicants, but for could be the same, but a second pass. So so perhaps we should look at the U.S. Amateur Floorball Championship application by the Kiawah Island Club for the $75,000, and again the rules on this SATEX money is that it has to be used for the promotion of tourism, and there's some other criteria in the list, and so to address the comment earlier about the fact that this tournament is going to be played on the 2 private courses, the only attendees won't be the membership of the club. It's open to the public. This $75,000 is to promote this tournament, which is a qualifying tournament for the U.S. Open, and it's a huge deal to have it on Kiawah. It just so happens that it's at the club. It'll be accessible to the general public. They'll be staying in rental houses on the island. They'll be staying in Airbnbs. It's not just to bring people to the club. So what they want is $75,000 to help them to advertise and promote this event. Okay?
So they actually applied for $100,000.
Right.
The $75,000 is a recommendation of that committee.
Now, so just so everybody understands the way the SATEX committee works and the amounts, there's a SATEX committee. And when they meet, they're given this list, much like the donation list, of all of the applicants and the amount that they've applied for. And typically, everybody that has made an application speaks and begs for their money from the SATEX committee. And then the SATEX committee takes a vote on how much they believe is warranted to be given to that organization out of these state accommodation tax funds. And then what Dorota does is she takes all of those votes, which are dollars, and averages them up, and that becomes the amount that the SATEX committee says that organization should get. So in this case, the 8 members of the SATEX committee voted, and the average was $75,000 that they'd be given.
Yes.
Minus-
And minus one, because if you're on the state ATEX committee and your organization is presenting, they recuse themselves and they're not voting on that
Yeah,
application.
so the general manager of the Kiowa Island Club is on the committee, and he did not vote on this, she did not vote on this particular item, okay?
That's correct. How much, when we had the PGA here, how much was given to the PGA?
You know, I have no idea, Alex.
The town and Kika. Kika gave 360, the town gave the same amount, I believe. And my point earlier was not that it was not open to tourists, the actual, as I've been on the website for the 4-ball, I wasn't making that point. I was making the point of how many non-golfers will visit the island as a result. And I know where Alex is getting. We're giving 75, we had like hundreds of thousands of people for 360. I just questioned what we're getting for 75.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's.
And we donated 75 without that answer?
Participants in this versus the, 12, 15,000 we had at the PGA?
Yeah, I don't remember, they told us.
I think at one point too, we're having a public meeting, so having this back and forth, we're not capturing it. So either they go up to the podium or we just have a meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, are you doing this kind of line item, or are we entertaining more general comments on the state tax monies right now?
I'm sorry, are you asking if we're taking it one at a time, line item?
Well, I mean, we can certainly do that, and I have comments on or thoughts on each of them, but I have some kind of broader concerns or issues, Stephanie, some of which you and I have discussed. That kind of feed into looking at the individual line items.
So why don't you give us what that general concerns are before we look at the individual line items?
So I've been struggling a little bit in trying to read some of the guidance from whatever it is, Stephanie, the committee that is kind of oversees the allocation of state monies, and reading the state statute. And and I think, John, you had said it has to be for tourism promotion. That's not quite the case. It's category 4, which is kind of the residual amount, has to be used for tourism-related expenditures. One of which is allowed. One of the enumerated tourism-related expenditures is tourism promotion. You actually don't have to spend any money on tourism promotion. You have to spend that 17 or that category 4 money on a tourism related expenditure. The other thing that's given me some pause is the way it's weirdly worded in the statute itself, where it says the funds received by a municipality which has a high concentration of tourism activity may be used to provide additional and county and municipal services, including but not limited to law enforcement, traffic control, public facilities and highway, as well as the continual promotion of tourism. The way one could read that, and the way I read that, but that's by no means dispositive, is that the municipality needs to be spending those monies, not directing them to a third party for-profit entity. But even putting that aside as a matter of policy, I have some concerns about giving monies to substantial monies to for-profit organizations that have their own substantial marketing budgets that we see in effect each and every day. And my personal preference would be see those monies go to much more not the advertising and promotion of additional tourism, because we have a lot of tourism right now and we have full facilities, but actually the other items where there is, supporting the infrastructure that, building out the infrastructure or maintaining the infrastructure that can accommodate or better accommodate the number of tourists that we actually have already.
So, Brad, I think that the idea of the for-profit thing, I think it's an interesting idea, but if we're giving money to organizations that are going to promote the Kiowa as a destination, I don't think that's in any way, shape, or form a misuse or a less than good use of the funds. And if you look at the amount of money that's requested in here and the recommendation amounts, about half of it, a little more than half of it is directly for the infrastructure items between that are there to take care of that tourist component of the visitors here, whether it be beach patrol services, sheriff's deputies, enhanced rescue equipment, and so forth. So I think we do address the infrastructure. Michael and I talked earlier about do we help to fund the fact that we want this EMS unit to be on the island full-time because the county doesn't have the funding to do that. So is that another opportunity to maybe redirect some of these funds towards that? But, to me, the fact that the Kiawah Island Golf Resort is going to get $475,000 to market Kiawah Island events. Those are not events that solely help the resort. They are to really help the island, and it generates more of this SATAX money the more people you have coming here spending the money. The same with the guy that runs the Andel Inn. He's going to get some, and that's, you could argue on one hand that the people that go to the Andel Inn don't benefit Kiawah Island to any degree. Well, we know that's not true. So, I don't think it should be, my opinion is it shouldn't be limited to only nonprofit organizations because other than the infrastructure people here, everybody's a for-profit organization.
Well, I just to clarify on one point, I'm not suggesting it's a misuse of funds, other than this question that kind of lingers in my mind, and I haven't gotten a satisfactory answer to it, is the way the statute's written, is that should the monies, the category 4 ATAX monies be actually spent directly by the municipality rather than directed to third parties. If that is in fact allowed under the state statute, and may very well be, it's just not clear to me, then I'm not suggesting, then it wouldn't be a misuse of funds directed to the resort or Freshfields.
But it's not, we don't have to spend it directly.
West. It would just be my personal preference, since Eden's and the resort have substantial marketing budgets, that all our monies, to the extent that we could actually utilize them for such purposes, would be focused on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, not 1. Let them do the 1.
Well, that's an interesting idea. The difference.
That's a personal preference. Now, the question with regard to, I'll say
Wait, stop.
The question with regard to the
stop,
resort.
Brad, stop for just a second. Stop for just a second. I think that if you look at spending money for marketing of Kiawah, I would argue that the resort and Eden's and possibly the Andel Inn, but just leave it as Eden's and the resort, are in way better shape to spend marketing dollars because they already have marketing departments and resources devoted to that, and the town doesn't. We don't have that kind of resource in the town staff. Now, one of the things that we give 30% of the SATAX money to the Charleston Convention Bureau, Charleston Visitors Bureau.
That's under a separate category that's required.
But we give it to them. We wouldn't have to give it to them. If we had our own if we had our own organization, we could spend that money.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But we don't have that kind of organization. Well, we also don't have the marketing organizations that these other entities have to promote the island.
John, I'm not at all suggesting that we create our own marketing organization. I'm not going anywhere near that. I would be completely opposed to doing that, building that infrastructure. I'm just saying there's no requirement that any monies be spent on item number 1. That's all.
What, the destination marketing and advertising?
No,
Yeah. There's no requirement that be spent on that at all.
Okay, are we now at 20?
Or any other party, that's all.
Okay, I thought we were discussing the 4-ball championship here. So
Well,
that's my category, number 1. Okay, so different to Brad, I have less an issue, so more like John here, with giving this money to for-profit organizations, et cetera, because honestly, they often do a better job. And as John said, they have their marketing departments, et cetera. I'm okay with that. Second, I think there's a good balance in both the current as well as the foregoing SADC funding proposal here, because it's really balanced 50-50 more or less between spending that really goes to the benefit of tourists, but also everybody else, like the lifeguard training equipment, like the beach patrol, like the sheriff's deputies. And in both years we are looking at here, it's almost exactly 50-50. So I'm okay with that. The problem that I'm having with a 4-ball is this event takes place in 3 weeks, okay? What are they going to do with $75,000 in the last 3 weeks? Either you have now decided already to come, you booked your flights, you booked your hotel or Airbnb or whatsoever. I have a problem with that. Second or third, in this particular respect, this is an organization that made that decision by themselves. They haven't even asked the members, to be honest, if they want this or not. Even for the members, I think this is more, more than an inconvenience, to be honest, right? But that was the decision that the club made, with all the consequences that come with it. So I would personally have a significant issue with voting yes on the 75.
So do you think this ought to be zero?
Yes.
So make a motion and.
I do. Or I will, yes, when we come to that point.
Just to piggyback on Michael's comments, I was actually looking at the USGA website. Is it in fact true that the public is allowed to spectate at the 4-ball? There is no, it doesn't appear to be any opportunity to buy tickets.
The tickets are free.
Okay.
There is no entry fee. They have volunteers from all over the island and all over the southeast coming to volunteer. So it's not, it is a public access, accessible event.
Okay. But the other thing, if you look like on the Kiawah Island, kind of to Michael's point, the Kiawah Island .com website, and what we've gotten in terms of the club membership literature, the way it's characterized is promoting the club and promoting the club's facilities.
Well, and that would argue the point that it ought to be zero, I think.
Okay. So we want to put a motion forward?
Sure.
Okay. I hereby put a motion forward to not approve $75,000 as funding for the U.S. Amateur 4-ball Championships this year, actually in 3 weeks from now.
Well, sequentially, are we doing that one first?
Well, this is for this year. This is for money this year, and then we'll come back and do next year's.
Addition to this year's.
This sheet here is
just being additive to that.
Yeah, but it's not additive. It comes out of different.
Right.
It comes out of this year's money. This comes out of next year's money. So we have a motion to recommend this funding to be zero. Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion about this particular item?
I'm good.
We've supported them in the past.
No, not this one.
No. I understand the 4-ball. PGA, a couple times. We've supported Cars on the Island a couple times. What's our rationale for not supporting this?
Well, I mean, based on what Michael and Brad have said, I think, not to put words in your mouth, Brad, but it's that it appears as though this is principally aimed at promoting the club, not helping to fund elements having to do with the golf tournament.
And it's also a timing issue.
Michael's point, it occurs in 3 weeks. The idea to how you're funding $75,000 now, either their costs have been covered now or they haven't. And if the costs haven't been incurred, if it's at a loss at the end of the day, that falls on the club members to actually make up, I assume, through increased assessments going forward. So
they have said that they covered the cost. Now this will be a reimbursement. So it's not like they're waiting for it.
So we have a motion and we have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of reducing this recommendation to zero, say aye.
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 Opposed? We have one opposed. Okay, now we have this is for next year's money, and keep in mind that while we think we have, the requested amount is 2.2, and we target allocating $2 million, we believe that we'll have more than that come November, where either additional or new applications for SATAX funding can be made. And the question is do we want to recommend this as it stands for council to make the final determination? Or do we want, and I guess I have, to a certain extent, I have a problem with if we make changes to these amounts and then give it to council and they say, no, we'll go back to the original amounts, are we kind of wasting our time, or do we say, okay, let's pass this on to council since it's the same people and let them finally, because we're going to have this same discussion tomorrow, the exact same discussion tomorrow. So I would move that we forward this to town council as is, for council to review and finalize at tomorrow's council meeting. Any second on that?
Well, with the, but we've already passed, so it can't be as is because we've already passed.
No,
the
they're two
motion
separate
to
things, Brad.
reduce
The 75,000 is for the current year. That one's done. We're going to recommend that they approve 0. Topic B is next year's, and my motion is we pass this as it is to council, and then have this discussion tomorrow to finalize any numbers.
For 23-24.
For 23-24. Yep.
Yeah, I second it, but I have questions.
Okay,
That I would
comments?
like to have clarified today, so
Yep.
I'm not sure exactly who can provide this. But for example, item number 2 or number 6 on my paper here, enhanced rescue equipment for the Barrier Island Ocean Rescue organization. So they wanted 250 and they're getting around 190. Any explanation?
Some people voted the full amount, some put 50,000, so this is the average of the committee members, the SATAX committee.
Oh, so they can vote on the amount and.
Yeah.
So they
Okay.
give me the amount, every individual member gives me the amount they're voting for, so that's why the amounts are so odd, because.
Yeah, so all of these come as a recommendation from the state aid tax committees.
So, Michael, to give you clarity on that, so the third item, $35,000 to events promotion for Edens, everybody on the SATAX committee voted they should get $35,000.
Yeah, no, I'm getting it.
So that's how it
fine.
was.
I wasn't aware about these things, yeah, okay.
Yep.
How they work, okay.
Okay? Any other
I mean,
comments?
So the only other
but
comment-
there is no, kind of to follow up on that, it would be helpful on a go-forward basis, maybe it's too late in the day for that now. We went through systematically with staff with regard to the $200,000 of charitable and got kind of
Right.
what the money is to be used
So
for.
that's a great
why
point.
it was given, recommended to be the full amount or something less. Here, we're talking about a 10X number, and we don't have any of that kind of
So I'll bring that
information.
tomorrow so that we can actually review the detail for each of these line items. I forgot to even bring it. I didn't even think I would need it today, but I'll bring that tomorrow, and it'll say exactly why they're asking for that amount, what it's being spent on, and whether they will have the program or not have the program if the full amount is not approved. And there are a couple of those, Brad. So, there's a couple of them where we've reduced the amount, and they've already told us if they don't get the full amount, they were not going to do the program. So, but I'll have that tomorrow for each one of these.
Okay.
And Brad, one of the things I'm not sure, but we put together a state aid tax application book for all of you guys, and that explains all of the programs.
That's what I'm going to bring tomorrow.
And I'm not
so
sure,
I'll have
maybe
that.
you were
I have it
gone.
here if you need.
Maybe it's on
We
your
don't wanna go through each one of
desk
them now.
since you haven't been here, but we do provide that information to you all.
Okay?
So the only comment I would make is when I was at the christening of the new fire truck on Friday, which actually was a great event, I spoke in length to the fire chief. And I learned a little bit to my surprise that we still, I think we mentioned to the community a couple of months ago, but we still don't seem to have a 24/7 EMS service on the island at Station 6, which is at the intersection of Flyway and Governors and Ocean Course Drive. So we seem to have the equipment, but there seem to be inconsistencies in terms of, funding for the people that would operate that on a 24/7 basis. I think that would be a very meaningful contribution from the state tax.
And in the rules, it says that you can include police, fire protection, emergency
Yes.
medical services, and emergency preparedness operations directly attendant to those facilities. So, as you and I spoke before this meeting, we can either add something to this tomorrow as council, or they can apply in
I would
November.
like, just give us an opportunity, because I've reached out to the DCA Watson over this, and he's reached out to Ryan. There may be some misunderstanding, and so he was trying to call me, and he said that both him and Ryan are on the same page. I need to find out what that page
Okay,
is,
yeah,
and
that's
then I
fine.
can discuss it.
But
more
worst
detail.
case, if there does need to be auxiliary funding there, they can reapply in November,
Yeah,
and then we can
that
fund
would
it.
also be a possibility. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, well, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Brad, hey, Brad, are you going to be at
Yes.
tomorrow's meeting?
Yeah, tomorrow, I'm already kind of over, but this next topic is very important, so I'm gonna be late to another meeting. I'm not gonna be able to stay for the entirety of this one, but I've carved out as much time as necessary for tomorrow.
Okay, perfect, because I'll have that information tomorrow to talk about it. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay. Item number 3. This is review and recommendation to Town Council for approval of a proposal from Kimley Horn for the roundabout benefit cost analysis. Dylan, are you gonna talk about this?
Dylan,
I don't have a presentation, but I can talk through it.
yeah, so if I can, Dylan is here to answer questions, but one of the things I know is part of this, because tomorrow's meeting, the way that I've set this up is to move this to after our executive session. Because essentially what we're asking him to do is, right now, is to look at a cost-benefit analysis for the roundabout. But of course, if we don't move forward with the purchase of the real estate, then this is not really, may not be something we need. So you guys are approving Ways and Means, of course, approves the funding piece of it, and Town Council really approves the actual, or Ways and Means, I'm sorry, you guys are making a recommendation to approve the funding to Town Council, and Town Council can decide tomorrow if they want to move forward with actually doing this project or not. And that discussion would probably, you'll make that decision depending on your executive session. So this actual approval for tomorrow is moved to after you come out of executive session, if you want to move forward with it or
And we're
not.
saying that it's okay, it would be okay to spend $16,450?
To make a recommendation.
To make a recommendation to spend the $16,450 pending council's approval of the project.
That's correct. And ultimately, Ways and Means is just a recommendation. Town Council actually makes the final decision to spend it or not spend it. And your decision could be, well, we need to see what we're going to do about the real estate, because if not, you guys' decision could be, then no, you're not going to spend. When it comes time to vote on this application tomorrow, the decision could be no, because it's not needed. Or if we want to make
But we have to
modifications.
approve the funds beforehand?
You're approving the funds today, because Ways and Means, remember, approves budget funding. So what could have happened is that we could have put this on the agenda tomorrow for you guys' discussion, then if you decide to move forward with it, then we'll go to, essentially go back to Ways and Means. And so it's kind of the way that this is set up, is that you're just making a recommendation. So the decision you make today is not a final decision. It's just a recommendation to council.
But is it even,
But it may be good for you guys to understand the project, but you're going to either do this, again, tomorrow for the public that comes to the town council meeting tomorrow to understand, if you decide to fund this, what we're funding.
I guess it would seem, it seems like to me that we're really kind of approving something that may or may not even.
You're making a recommendation, you're not approving anything.
Making a recommendation for something that may or may not even come to pass based on a different decision that's made tomorrow.
Right, so your recommendation is
I'm
for
not
the
sure that I
funding.
wouldn't-
Your recommendation is
Wait a
just for the
minute, I
funding
wouldn't-
piece.
Why wouldn't we just delay this until the next Ways and Means Committee pending the outcome of the council meeting tomorrow?
You could, or you can do it that way.
And we could get into a protracted conversation about the merits of this before we approve it, and then tomorrow they decide no, and we've just wasted 30 minutes of our time.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we just hold this aside until we find out what council wants to do with the building and the,
It's just that in order so that it doesn't go to council, Ways and Means, and back to council, it may be a way that we can do that, because Ways and Means, even if it goes back to Ways and Means, you guys can't approve anything, you just make a recommendation. So if council approves the
That's okay. We
project,
have an
it
emergency
goes to
meeting or a
Ways,
call
right.
meeting or
We
something
can have a
if need
special
be.
call meeting, because
But
council approves the project.
So, but
Ways and Means.
I'm okay with just deferring this.
I think deferring is
Also because I have a couple of substantive questions about this, if
which
I
I
may.
don't know that we're in a position to answer until we
As
know
do
the
I,
answer.
so I would agree with that as well.
You can discuss it.
Since
It's
we
okay to
have-
discuss it.
Since we have a gentleman
And I'd
here
ask
from.
Kinley Horn a bunch
Right.
of questions as to, you know, the placement of all this stuff. So if we can just defer that, then that's fine.
It's fine, or you can
I would
discuss.
say let's defer, so can I have a motion to defer this till after the council meeting tomorrow?
Well, after the council meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, not immediately after, but at the next Ways and Means after tomorrow.
You mean at the end of town council's meeting tomorrow?
Defer it to, we defer the discussion and recommendation for this Kimley Horn element
To May 27th or whatever that is.
till whatever our next Ways and Means
Yeah.
is, till May, is that what it is, May 27th?
I mean, some.
Until the next Ways and Means Committee.
Yeah.
So procedurally, I don't know the answer to this, Stephanie, can the council act independently of Ways and Means, or does it have to go through Ways and Means first?
Council, we have at times allowed council to essentially act independent and go ahead and approve a project with the funding. But if there's concerns about kind of procedurally how our ordinance is written up, it typically goes to Ways and Means. Ways and Means then essentially are approving the funding. They're not necessarily approving the project, but they're approving the funding. Then it goes to council as a recommendation from Ways and Means to approve the funding. Then council decides if they want to do the project. They want to do the project, they're approving essentially the project and the funding.
So our ordinance does require that prior to council consideration or approval.
I don't think it says it
any
that way
budgetary item or funding obligation that it has to go
It doesn't,
through
it doesn't
Ways and Means
state, it
first?
doesn't state the way that you just worded it, but because this is not a budgeted item in our budget, I can't take it straight to town council. This would be a new item that we're asking for Ways and Means to approve,
Ways and Means to recommend.
to recommend.
Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to be talking about a very important project. We may or may not agree, but if we come out of it and we agree, an integral part of the due diligence for that project is this.
This, yes.
That's
So
right.
we should
So
approve,
it doesn't make sense to me that we would, if we come out of the session and we agree to proceed. If we don't, it's a moot point. But if we do, we should be ready to get this started. I am very curious to know whether or not there's any, this to me is the driving component of the project, whether there's really value to acquiring that land to be able to build a roundabout.
but we're not really approving or recommending this work so much as we're recommending that we be able to spend $16,450.
Yeah, I think just to keep it
Say that
easy,
again.
whatever you guys are, I think if you decide to move forward with this project today, and he can have a discussion, you all are just making a recommendation. You're not approving anything. So today, if you want to essentially keep the ball moving, you can have Dylan, we can discuss this project,
I like that more.
and then you all can make a recommendation to council. Then tomorrow, when you're still having this full discussion, you guys can then go ahead and proceed with all of this project, as the mayor said, as opposed to
Right.
tabling essentially. So
Yeah,
you're,
I guess my point is that I want to be sure we're not getting the cart before the horse here. So we've got this write-up that says this is a project that we want to do, and Ways and Means is getting ready to decide to recommend this to council or not.
Correct.
What is it we're recommending? Are we recommending the funding for this, or are we recommending the actions of the project?
well, you're recommending the funding, but of course it would be the actions of the project.
Well, it's the funding because this is how Dylan and his crew has defined the project.
Right.
But tomorrow, after council meets and decides what we're going to do, and depending on the outcome,
Right.
this project could change a little bit. But what we will have done in the meantime is we will approve spending up to $16,450 to do this.
That's correct.
So really, all we're recommending, all we're going to vote on here is to
16.
recommend to council that they have $16,450 available to execute this project or some
Right.
variation thereof.
Correct, that's correct.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, I would be fine with that as long as there's an opportunity to get some clarification directly from Kimley Horn about what they characterize as alternative 2 and alternative 3, and whether, you know, they've already made some judgment as to that has to be the exact placement of those roundabouts, for example, or that simply that's a placeholder. That's the principal concern I have, and that's you know, part of a Riverview concern, having folks have looked at this now. And so if there's an opportunity to still have that kind of conversation, even if we go forward with saying 16,000 to explore the concept of 1 or 2 roundabouts, whether from a cost benefit standpoint, without making any decision as to this is where they're going to be.
Yeah, see, to me, Brad, that makes the most sense, so I move that we recommend to council that they can spend up to $16,450 for a study that regarding the intersection, pending the outcome of the council discussions tomorrow. That would be my motion. Is there a second for that?
Second. Can I ask questions?
Yeah,
Or
sure.
voice concerns. I don't think this is the right place then to debate it, but I wanted to make sure. First, I got a new version of your proposal minutes before the meeting. I don't really know what the difference is. Maybe you want to point that out prior to tomorrow. Not right now, just in the interest of time. But help us to understand what is different between what we received last week and then this. Minor point.
I haven't received anything, so I don't know what you're even.
Well, that's
It's not handed out. You'll have it tomorrow.
It's not really much new version. Only thing that changed is one sentence that I had him change in there. And the only one sentence, so your version, Michael, that you got really isn't very brand new. It was just, I had them change, what was it? It was just a word that was.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it. But everything else, your alternatives are just not.
Okay, fine. That's okay. That's okay.
So any other comments, questions?
Yes, I have 3 concerns. One, the alternative 1 is already under design, right? I know that Russ and others are working on this. Why are we at risk here to pay double? First question. Second question. I looked at your drawings, and I know they are sketches, right? But in both cases, alternative 2 and 3, it would require the entire demolition of the Kira building, okay? Is that the only way to do it? Because that changes our discussion tomorrow fundamentally, right? Or is this just a sketch and it could also look different? Or are there alternatives where the Kira building would remain at its current place?
You know, that's an
Not clear to
interesting
me.
point, but if tomorrow we decide that we are going to proceed, and oh, by the way, Dylan, we do not want to tear the building down, then he'll have to go back and change the routing on this. Or let us know that you can't do it. One way or the other. So again, I think today, and to Brad's point, we're not committing to this study, we're not committing to these results, we're committing to recommend the council has up to $16,450 to execute a project, this project or one very similar, pending the outcome of the council meeting tomorrow.
It's all fine with me, John. I just want to address my concerns in this direction to make sure that nobody feels like we now approved something that would, by definition, demolish the building.
That's right.
Because I think that's premature.
Yep.
And I think we also want to look at options that explicitly say we want to keep it. How would that look like?
Yep.
Which might add an alternative 4 or 5 to this. That's all part of the discussion we are going to have tomorrow.
Correct.
Final comment of mine. I know it was brought up a few times in our community outreach meetings where people from Little Rabbit showed up with their, I think, relevant concern that they are outside of that viewpoint here, okay? Which is, the little community right at the beginning behind Mingo Point. And the current setup for them to exit their properties, especially by going towards Freshfields, is a really dangerous way of how the street is set up. So I would prefer if we can include this also in making sure we find a way, however, the markings on the streets are going to look like, to give them an easy access.
At the exit of the point.
Exit. The entrance might also be an issue in terms of coming from the island into, but I think the most severe traffic risk, safety risk, is really the exiting from the property towards Freshfields. If you want to keep that in mind, please. Thank you. That was it.
Okay.
Dylan, just a couple of things.
If I could just
Hang on, Brad.
Cost
just follow up on Michael's point. And this really relates to, I guess, now what we're approving, because while I may not particularly value maintaining the KIRE building, I appreciate that colleagues may, but I would say if taking down the KIRE building leads to the best cost-benefit analysis from a traffic mitigation or flow standpoint, then it should go.
Brad, to interrupt you here. So I was not trying to speak in favor of the KIRE building, but it is a discussion we are going to have tomorrow because it then is a decision point in what we are putting into our letter of intent in terms of the value, right? If we know from the very beginning,
fair enough, but I guess what I was going to get to is that it may be that if you're suggesting that they look at other additional alternatives and formulations, and I'd be interested in, whether the first roundabout could be pushed further north, since the alternative 2 has traffic flowing about 30 feet from Riverview houses in townhouse number 1. Number 2, just like you had mentioned about Little Rabbit, this doesn't in any way address the concerns that the Oyster Rake folks had raised. And does the study need to necessarily involve a solution if there's not going to be a solution for them at this intersection elsewhere? And so then the question becomes, if we're going to be suggesting additional alternatives, I think this proposal is for $16,000 is, I think, just for these 3 alternatives, 16,000, they may come back and say it's actually going to be 50,000.
And then we'd have to vote again for the additional funds, I think, is how that would work, Brad, if that turns out to be the case. Because what we're saying is we're allowing the council to spend up to $16,450. It's incumbent on Kimberly Horn to decide if they're going to be charitable and do it for that, or ask for more money. Yeah. Any other comments? Mr. Mayor, do you have a comment?
Cost. You use a derivative of square footage or something? Is that how you're going to come up with, in terms of the size, the scope, the scale? So, do you go there? Yeah, please. Because this doesn't include engineering, correct? Oh, go ahead. I'm just questioning how you came up with, how you're going to come up with the calculus to this cost.
Yeah, so the cost, we're going to use SCDOT standard methodologies and assumptions. So they have this spreadsheet. Okay. So when we're looking at different alternatives of trying to, if we wanted to look at an alternative to save the building, really that roundabout cost doesn't change that much. What you're saving is a building cost, but we've got to look at the tie-in radiuses and stuff, the nerdy engineering stuff, to see if it actually can happen.
Okay, so you take your concepts and compare it to that. Okay, benefit. So you're going to take your flow studies and be able to determine changes, presumably improvements to the flow, and then again come up with some type of equivalent of a benefit associated with that.
Right, and we do a cost-benefit analysis whenever we do. I mean, it's for this, it would be to that level a little bit overkill, but we're going to use information from stuff that we do for federal grants that look at capacity, flow, travel time, even down to some emission type stuff that we would be looking at as a benefit, so that we have our, the roundabouts, either 2 or 3, are going to cost more than what we're currently under design for. Right. So to answer the question as well from Councilman Michael is We are under contract for design. We've completely paused it. So if we did decide, hey, we don't want to do that, or hey, we might move forward with that as step one, and the roundabouts longer term, I don't know how we move forward with that, but those costs won't be lost costs. They'll just be either tied in, or if we don't move forward with stuff tomorrow, we'll probably finish our design.
Just so everybody understands that, so on the one schedule that you prepared for alternative one, way back when we went down the benefit line, you begin to see how the improvements get back to flows, to how many more additional traffic. So it becomes very objective, but then it becomes very subjective to say, oh, wow, that's really a big deal. It's going to cost you $1 million to be able to do that or something like that. So
and that's why we want to use a different term, because if you look at cost alone, the roundabouts are going to cost more. But I don't know if that's a fair assessment of a project.
And the engineering really doesn't come into it at this particular moment.
And that's, I'll talk to Councilman Brad's point there, is that where those roundabouts are shown in the concept is not like a final thing. It's a preliminary layout, so whenever we had the council meeting, I don't remember if it was 2 council meetings ago or the last council meeting, time is absolutely flying by. So we talked about maybe with this building potentially being a purchase, we are left with more options as roadway and maybe having a grand entrance into the town or into that part of Kiowa. Like you've got right out here, you've got a great roundabout. So looking at another type of option for that. So Brad, there is flexibility to move it further away from Little Rabbit.
Riverview, I guess what I was most interested, Dylan, while we have you here, is both alternative 2 and alternative 3. And notionally, alternative 3 seems to me kind of interesting, and you could, depending on where you move the roundabout, you might be able to do that and save the KIRE building. But you've actually pushed the traffic now south of where it shows the current road is exiting the island, as opposed to, was there a conscious decision as to why that was done, as opposed to pushing a little further north?
It's to tie in where
from existing housing stock, and that would probably allow you, if you wanted to do so, to potentially save the KIRE building.
Yeah, we can talk about all this stuff, but those roundabout layouts were based off of GIS data and trying to stay away from critical lines and stuff. So this whole project, the benefit cost that we do, is going to be based off of really GIS versus survey. If we went into a survey level, our costs are much higher. But Brad, when we decide, hey, this might be alternative we want to move forward with, once again, if this even goes forward tomorrow, that's all stuff that we can look about as far as moving the roundabout further away from Riverview. That's not going to change this contract much at all. It's not going to change it much at all from what we're actually doing. We're going to cost out those roundabouts, and if they move 20 feet to the north, 30 feet to the north, wherever, it's not going to change these numbers that we would present very much at all.
But it's
so
very
right now,
essential. But that's a very essential point, right? Because it might determine, the life or the death of the KIRE building, right? And I wanted to also make sure that you understand that, yes, there are certain limitations, north, because the buildings are now up there, but only until the leisure trail coming from the Oyster Lake area.
Right.
After that, I think that's all conservancy, right? Or a good portion of it, I believe. So we should not limit ourselves in saying, okay, the current, curb of the Kiowa Island Parkway is our limit, right? If we can move it, a couple of feet or whatever north, as you said, this could change the whole layout and could determine the life or death of the building.
Exactly. And what that would do is if we add an alternative, see where we're at with contract spend and stuff like that. If we need to do an amendment, we can. If we still have budget in there, we can add that in there. If we want to look at a fourth alternative of trying to save the building, because that cuts out a cost line item, so then that ratio we're looking at will be higher because the cost.
So
will
I
be lower.
understand. In terms of alternative 1,
yes,
we're ready to go to bid, correct?
You are very close to be going ready to bid. we had one line item to go through, and that was the right turn lane, because the right turn lane on the parkway, from the parkway onto Beach Walker, we found that there was the pipe under
Utility
there.
stuff.
And we were gonna actually go back and take it out, because the benefit of that wasn't as high as maybe those costs were. And so we were gonna vote on that, I think, the last council meeting, and then that did not move forward because we wanted to talk more about.
Just so we know,
This.
that alternative one is that far along, we've got documents, okay.
Yeah,
You know, so-
yeah, it's very, very, very close. It's probably a week's worth of work away from being able to go to bid.
And we have it in the budget.
Okay, any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Question.
Opposed?
Do y'all want me tomorrow too? I can be here tomorrow.
You know, I think it would probably, if you don't have anything else to do, it would be helpful to have
I've got
you here.
things to do, but I love you guys, so
Nothing
I
as
can
important
be
as
here.
this, though, right?
So, what's that?
Nothing as important as this.
Right, that's right, that's right. So I can be here.
It would help, I
Okay.
think. We may not even ask you a question.
That's
But
fine.
it'd be nice if we did.
But you don't have to be there for the beginning of the meeting. It's just the very end.
Yeah, it's at the very end. Well, by the end of the meeting, come about 6:30.
Yeah,
And you'll be
okay.
good.
Okay,
3 or 4.
cool.
Yeah, probably 3, yeah, be good.
Perfect, that sounds good, I'll be
But
here.
only if it's really, okay, it's.
Or you
Yeah.
could, we could send you a text that says about 2:30, yes, come or no, if you want. Do you want us to do that?
I'll be here.
Okay. All right. Okay, the next item on the agenda is review and recommendation of town council for approval of the proposal for the annual traffic counts. And this is something we've done a number of times. We do it 3 times a year. We do it from Betsy Carrison to the intersection of Governor's Drive. The cost is $27,300. And I guess I would entertain a motion to make this recommendation.
So move, yeah, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions on this one?
I just have one question for John, and it vexed me a little bit in the past with regard to the count. When, there's a peak hour, metric that, there's a trigger. When I've seen this data before, it's only reported, I believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, in quarter-hour increments. But I assume the data is down to literally the second. And in measuring what is the peak volume over any, I would hope that you would be measuring the peak volume over any given 60-minute time span. So it may be 8:13 to 9:13 in the morning, rather than 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock or 9:15, depending on whatever shows the highest volume over any 60-minute period. And that doesn't seem that's how it's been reported in the past.
The output for the services provided is able to break down that level of detail to the 15-minute increments. The data that was shown in the output showed the hourly rate as it being able to better correlate vehicles per hour as indicated in the 10.1 exhibit based on the development agreement. So it's just marrying to what the output was referenced in that particular development agreement.
But that just simply says hour. It doesn't say, I don't think it specifies that it has to be, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., does it?
No, so it doesn't, but it has, basically on the hour is, I think, easier digestible for the community. And so that has been the use in displaying that information.
So I guess what you're asking, is it a static hourly basis like the clock face, or is it a dynamic, moving 60-minute time frame every minute, if really?
Yeah. I mean, that data, they should have that available. I mean, if they're collecting the data, they know exactly what time everything car is going through. So I would hope, since, what we're trying to capture is what is the peak traffic flow over any 60-minute period, that may be, like I said, from 8:42 to 9:42 or 7:17 to 8:17, as opposed to just in a quarterly increment basis.
So my first statement was that, I meant the output data, we are able to have the both 15-minute and 60-minute intervals to see that data. So we would have 15-minute intervals broken out.
John, so are you saying we can't actually, they're not collecting the data on a minute-by-minute basis? They have to be.
And then, but it sounds like, Brad, they're then summarizing it into 15-minute clock face intervals.
So then the question is, I guess what I'm raising is, can that be changed? Because they obviously have the data. And we get a report that shows it what the peak traffic flow is over any 60-minute period during
I would just
windows.
I can ask that question to the vendor to clarify that.
Let's at least ask, because, you know, if you're doing 15-minute intervals, you could barely miss the peak. Yep. All right, so there's a motion and a second to recommend this to council. Any other discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. I'm sorry, just one question. Are we now paying for the tubes or the count stick?
So this would be for the tubes.
Okay.
Yeah. I do want to just add that based on last year, we did identify a few failures, and so the remedy to that is to add a camera as backup for the.
Yep.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Does anyone need a 3-minute break? You do?
Well, I'm going to have a permanent break for today, so my apologies for abandoning you all, but I will see you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks for your time. See you tomorrow. All right, we're going to take about 4 minutes, and then we'll start with the
Was just going to go so you can see this. Okay, so from past few months, we were looking at the detailed budget. We look at the revenues, we look at the expenditures. So right now, I just want to mention the changes from what was presented to you last month, and we'll just look at the overall performance. So the first change is an increase of $60,000 that was Carolina Waste asked for the 5% CPI adjustment, and that's going to be like $60,000. So this is in the waste management line item. Another change is a consultant line item. It's an increase of $50,000. It's an it's for the zoning codes updates that are related to the development agreement. We originally had 150, but based on some more research, we asking for a placeholder of 200. The big one is in a capital outlay. We put a placeholder for $5 million. Right now it's called Upper Beach Walker Project. It will include all this, the purchase of the building, potential work, the infrastructure work. So at the moment, it's just $5 million, not really specific. Once we know, right now, it's all in a general fund. Once we know a little more detail, if, for example, it's the work that is for the infrastructure, well, 70% of that could be funded from restricted funds. And the very last one, based on a discussion from last month, we added $200,000 as a placeholder to start the initiative on the island-wide electric station, or charging station for electrical cars. And that's pretty much it. This is the changes from what you have seen. And with all this, including those changes, we will end up with the deficit of $2,247,000.
But what that deficit does not include is some portion of this $5 million that could be.
No, it's all included.
No, I mean, you got the $5 million, but some of that will come out of restricted funds.
Yes, but so this is the $2 million for it's an overall.
Okay, gotcha.
But when we look at the that's what I was going to do next. So when we look at the funds, right now it's all pretty much. You'll see this big deficit of $4 million in general fund, but that includes the whole $5 million.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. So pretty much we're taking the money from the reserves right now. It doesn't include any financing or anything.
But only in the case we would really spend those $5 million.
Right.
If you take that out for whatever reason,
yes,
we are nicely in the positive.
Or if that is more,
right.
then yes.
We should not forget that.
Yes.
And the $5 million is for this entire project.
It's a placeholder too.
So it's a placeholder, so nobody should think that we are spending $5 million on the Kira building, right?
Yeah.
It goes far beyond that.
That's correct.
Right, so the $5 million placeholder would be for
the whole
roundabout and whatever else we need to do, right?
Yep.
I know
premise.
that. I just wanted to remind
that's the premise.
us, but also the community on this one. Thank you.
Well,
Dorada, I have one. I'm sorry.
Sure.
John, no,
go. No, go.
So when I was reading the waste management topic number 1 here, it reminded me one of the topics of our green initiative is to consider. I think we said hypothetically at the moment 4 times a year we would have hazardous waste pickup events here at the site, for which we need to contract somebody other than actually Carolina Waste because they're most likely not doing this. Is that potential project in the budget right now, or would that be in addition?
No.
Okay.
No, that would be something. Then we come back, but we do have 100,000 in contingency.
Yeah. I just
Yes.
wanted to know. I'm okay. I mean, if it comes to that point, we'll come back to the Ways and Means, of course. But I just wanted to know if it's in there or not.
No.
That's fine. Thank you.
Mayor.
Just a comment, question, I don't know, rhetorical question. fundamentally, getting to this, Mrs. St. Peters, but her name, a budget to a very large extent drives an organization. You know, you approve line items, you project prices, you project volumes, et cetera. We publish that when it's approved.
Of course.
But we've really not solicited response, reaction from.
We do have public hearing that will be held between the first reading and the second reading. However, we
Okay.
never had a lot of
I
input.
forgot about that. That makes me feel better. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
we do have it. We advertise the public hearing advertised as any other meeting.
I'm sorry, I forgot about. So as we sit here and we approve a line item of $200,000 for charitable contributions, and we have the first reading, and this place is packed, there's just a hue and cry that it should be so much more, as an example.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then, all right, that makes me, yeah, I'm sorry, I just was trying to think, where do we really, because as individuals get up and ask questions, well, number one, they're not here, you really can't even answer the question, because you're not, you know, they've gone, and, okay.
Yeah.
And this will be, this public hearing will be part of a town council meeting or will be separate?
Separate.
Different day, different time, just for that. Perfect. Thank
And
you.
just for the budget.
Yeah.
What we have done in the past, we have it, for example, before Ways and Means, on the day of Ways and Means, just to make it convenient for the council. But, and I feel like it works because it is outside from, it's not the same day as a town council, it's Ways and Means. So we felt like that's a good day. And it's also published in the newspaper, not as detailed. It's just published a very, very brief summary, not even like the summary you're looking at. Yes. But I want to also just bring your attention to just the fund balances too, how we're gonna, with those projections, how we're gonna end, or projecting to end up with our total consolidated fund balance would be at $25 million. And that's where I want to start your or a little discussion about those reserves levels, because today I do have a little document that I prepared. Then I just want to start this and put like a foot for thought, just to get this going, so we can arrive with the good, comfortable reserve levels that this council feels like this is what we want to be, and you know, drive the other expenditures or you know, other projects for the budget. But I also want to answer those questions that the residents ask about the budget. So I may just do it now, and then we'll talk about the reserves. So as far as the interest income, last year, the interest rates were really low. We were at 10 basis points, where this year with 480. So the main driver from that 50,000 to over $1 million is how the interest rate market is. We also added about 6 million through the 4 million from last year and 2 million this year to our savings, to our investments. So that is more, but the biggest drive is the interest rate.
Yeah.
And the other questions about the difference, pretty much our revenues are projected about with like 700 more or less than what it is this year. But this is mostly due to 440 that we got this year from the federal funds for the COVID funding that we're not getting next year. And we had the money from the special projects from the Seafields that we're not gonna get it next year. It's about 600,000. Next year we only budgeting about 300 for other commercial projects. So we short 300,000 in special projects. So between those two numbers, the revenues is pretty much comparable to what we had this year, what we projecting this year. For the budget. And as far as the expenditures, the salaries.
Dorota.
Yes.
So last time we spoke about the revenue side a little bit, right? And we were going back and forth a little bit about your assumptions for new construction, right? Where you go from, I think this year, 100 permits down to 70. Right, that's your current plan. That's why we are losing those $300,000 in business in building permits. Have you received any additional information from the Kiowa Island Real Estate Company or so, how they are projecting next year to be? I mean, do we need to really be so conservative that we are losing 30% of homes being built on this island in just 1 year?
They just published a report that showed first quarter, 21, 22, and 23.
Yeah, that's home sales. But I was wondering, we are now building permits. So, I mean, we still have a lot of lots that have sold but not been built on.
Yes, no, I reach out to them, but I haven't received their budgets yet. So this is really conservative, I feel like. So this is just to be conservative based on what it was this year. And, yeah.
Okay. No, I just wanted to know if you have any. I mean, I'm okay as long as we know that this is really, really conservative.
It is.
Right? And you know, you will probably face a couple of questions about this in the open hearing. Right? But I was just wondering if there's new information.
Well, hopefully I can get something by then. I'll need to ask for this again. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
And as far as expenditures, so salaries, there is only we're not asking for any new positions, but this year compared to last year, we when you look at the full-time employee equivalents, we were 2 people short. We just our communication manager. We didn't have this position for a couple of months, and the planning assistant. So. And we did ask for the a placeholder or like an aggregate for increases for next year, and that's pretty much what that number. That's why the number is higher. And as far as the contracts for the beach patrol and the code enforcement, they were approved as it is, but those prices. They were for 5 years. They didn't increase any prices, so they pretty much. And this contract is for another 5 years. So I guess they amortize that CPI increases that everyone would be getting through every couple of years, and that's how those contractual services are just higher.
When we did that contract, they gave us the breakdown on where those increases were coming from, if I recall. And
so yeah. So anyway, I just want to address those questions that.
Yeah.
Yes. So
we had that discussion.
The retirement every year the PIVA retirement they increase the employer portion by 1% to reduce the gap in liability, and the health insurance goes up for 2 years. With the COVID year, and after COVID, it was flat. They didn't have any increases, so they have to make up for those increases, and they keep the employee portion fixed. They're not increasing it, so employer pretty much eats that cost a little bit. So that's how they, increase in employee benefits comes in.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Oh, sure.
To the expenditures. One is, remind me again on your page 6 of your written up document here, $80,000 for public safety study. Remind me again what that is?
Yes. So we were thinking about possibly, and if you recall, we talked about this at the retreat, bringing maybe police office here. What kind of need?
Consultant to how we would start our own police force.
Yeah. What kind of need do we need for the public safety for police coverage?
Okay.
And this is also placeholder. It's not a just a placeholder for. We based it on. I want to say the study I think we had that.
That was done at previous meetings.
Along.
It was done like 13 or 14.
Oh, okay. So that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then the second question is really more important. So for our expenditures for professional services have skyrocketed, from my point of view, right? I mean, we are currently, after 3/4 of the year, at $163,000, and that does not even include, to my understanding, the most recent bills for the 134 Blue Heron topics, et cetera, et cetera. So we would need to assume that in this current year even still, we would probably end up with somewhere around 200K, which is A, substantially above budget, but B, also a significant misconnect with the number that we have currently in the 23-24 budget, where you are actually saying, well, not you, I mean, where we so far are saying that actually our attorney costs in particular, will go down 11%. Honestly, if the current state of mind of the community and council members remain where it is, we will not expect a decline. We will, at least need to budget similar to what we are going to spend today.
Okay, so I will change that number.
That's a concern I'm having, so we need to look into this a little bit more. I will also address that tomorrow when we have a couple of more numbers just for the Blue Heron topic. It is mind-blowing, right? I mean, we are spending just an enormous amount on legal services right now.
Respond to the 400
to
attorneys
respond,
that live here.
exactly, to respond to inquiries actually coming here from from certain town council members, but even more, coming from certain groups of individuals in the community. So I'm really concerned that this goes on, and that might be a real risk to that budget item.
So there's two solutions to that. One is just increase the budget and continue to do it, and the other is figure out how not to do it.
That is the alternative.
Yeah.
Well, we're having an executive session on the 15th of May on that very specific subject.
Yep.
And Stephanie and I and Joe and I have talked about this very issue. Trying to be responsive comes at an extraordinarily high price.
And you're only going to be but so responsive because if they don't get the answer they want, they're just going to keep asking questions.
Well, that's where I was going to. It's not as though these are all one-offs.
Right.
It's like, we can't say as though that we've had hundreds of individual unique requests. We've had X number of requests over and over and over again. And it's going to be a subject that we're going to have to talk about. We're getting near now $250,000, and I don't see necessarily, unless we intervene, it going down.
Yeah.
And I think
it's highly unproductive. Okay, and that's why I'm bringing it's highly unproductive.
Right, correct.
Right, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because I don't think that A, the community, and B, even those that are bombarding us with these questions even realize what the consequences are. The consequences for our spendings and budget and bottom line that we want to use for other purposes than these pages of legal statements that, exactly as you said, John, not even accept at the end of the day because it's contrary to their own opinion.
That's right.
Well, and I think the important point to note, Michael, in that in the 2.5 years since John and I started getting involved, there hasn't been we haven't found an oops. We haven't really found anything that just says, oh my, that is a bad decision, and there hasn't been anything. But the things anyway. So yeah, it's an important subject.
But I think Michael, you raise a important point, because over a year that number could get enormous.
I mean, even if it would stay in the 23-24 time frame like we are facing it now for this current budget year, it's outrageous.
It's outrageous.
Why would we are spending $250,000 on legal fees? That is totally unproductive.
Well, it's exacerbated because we don't have the association's legal fees, and I think if we had it and added it, it would be it'd be
a $500,000.
It'd be a chunk of change, and I think people need to understand.
Maybe so.
It comes to them. It comes to us as residents in the form of
Assessments.
association dues, it comes to the residents in the form of us because we don't spend it on something else.
Which is productive.
I'd much rather be giving $200,000 or whatever more to these needy. Anyway, yeah, we can. It's a tough issue.
But that's why I'm bringing it up, John, because I think we
Well, no, I'm just
need to
saying-
make that.
We have the executive session to talk
We
about
make,
this very.
exactly. But still, where we are today, we need to make this public. And I will also address that tomorrow when we talk about it, because I think the community needs to understand the consequences.
Yep, I agree.
So then for the second reading, because tomorrow is going to be the first reading on the budget, so it will be, I mean, I can make changes, but I was thinking, the mayor mentioned something that mid-month you're going to have a discussion. For the second reading, I can change that number if needed, or increase it, or
Well, let's see.
leave it for now.
No,
and-
I
yes.
would recommend no changes for tomorrow,
Okay.
of course, because we
Okay.
already published everything.
Okay.
But we will address it tomorrow. I will address
Okay,
it again.
absolutely,
We will
yeah.
discuss about this again tomorrow, I think, and I hope.
Because tomorrow
And
is the first reading.
first reading.
That's correct.
So
Yes.
we
That's a
accumulate
good-
all these potential changes and get them done.
And that's all fine, and I would hope then that we will also be able to have a profound discussion about this during the open hearing, right? So that we then can decide, do we need to make a change, or are we finding a way of mitigating or reducing it, as you said?
Okay.
All right, so
any more questions on the budget? Or we can move to, I mean, it is still part of the budget, the reserves. I want to just, like 5 minutes, really.
Yeah, do like we talked the other day about
Yes.
the reserves, yeah.
Approve, yes, a recommendation, those changes, to approve those changes and the whole
Oh,
budget draft.
the four in the beginning, you mean?
Yeah, because we need to
Yeah.
have a motion to
Approve that.
recommend to council.
Okay.
Can we have a motion?
So I hereby propose that we put a motion in play to approve those four topics here on the first page called changes to the full year 24 budget draft presented on 3/27/23.
Second? And any more discussion? To recommend, and recommend that this budget
No,
be
those four.
the approval of the fiscal 23-24 budget.
Yeah, those four here on that particular
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
That's why I quoted even the title of this page.
Okay, so we have a motion, and we have a second. No more discussion.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, DeRoda, it's still your turn.
Yes, so I don't know if and I apologize, I sent this paper late, so I don't know if it's made it on those reserves that I sent it out on Friday. Yes. Okay. So anyway, I'm not gonna go to. I feel like this needs more time and more discussion, but just something that you can start thinking about. So when we talk about at the retreat and many times that what is the comfortable level of reserves? Because there is sometimes comments that our reserves are too high, or so what would be the best way? And so I have, after those discussions, I have identified 3 risks that the town is vulnerable to. The extreme weather, the shortfall in revenues, and this is not a risk, but something to save up for capital projects. And currently, we do have few policies that address the reserve levels. One is for our unrestricted general fund balance that will not go less than 30% of the budgeted expenditures from general fund, which, for example, for next year would be at 3.7 millions. This is really not a sign how this money would be spent, what kind of, what would be spent if it's revenue shortage or, or a hurricane. So this is just very vague. And another one is that we do transfer 20% of our local accommodation tax and hospitality tax to capital project fund and emergency project fund, so 40% in total. So those are just 3 policies that we currently have. If you look at this table that, I know some people don't have that document, but at the table on my paper, so it will show you that for next year, for the budgeted year, our unassigned fund balance, what we actually have to, based on those current policies, it's 11 million. So when we talk about those reserves that we have 30 million in the bank, of that amount, only 11 is unassigned that could be spent up to the town's or town council discretion. The rest is already either committed to something or assigned. Yes, sir?
Which is maybe not 100% correct, because when you make a statement like this, we should add the 5 million back in, right? Because the 5 million is exactly what you're saying. You're taking 5 million out of our undesignated funds. So yes, it's correct for your numbers in terms of the budget, but when we really look at it the way you were wording it, how much undesignated funds we have, then at the moment we actually have 16,674,000.
That is correct, because that 5 million is already, but because it's just a placeholder, it kind of went as a general expenditure. So yes, but without that 5 million, we would have 16 million unassigned. Yep. So what I'm proposing is to actually assign specifically in those reserves, assign specific money specifically for certain components, as for the emergency reserves, for the capital projects, and for the budget stabilization. For the emergency reserves, with the hurricanes and the costs related to after hurricane, those numbers are just huge and not knowing and very hard to assign. However, there's few elements or a few items that we do know the cost of. For example, if we do have, if we need to put a temporary bridge, we know what's the cost of that. We know what is the cost of beach renourishment if right after, like emergency beach renourishment right after hurricane. We can assign some of those numbers, and that way we can build like the minimum reserves. So what I'm proposing, just for your consideration, is that number for emergency reserve would be at about 8.5 million.
And the makeup of that is $1.5 million for cleanup cost, $1.5 million connected to the bridge replacement, $4.5 million for lost revenue during a period that the island is down after a hurricane comes through, much like Sanibel Island is experiencing now. Is that for 1 year? It's for, we figured for 4 months is when we were talking.
For 4 months.
And then $1 million for other costs, which might be road damage, town asset destruction, those kinds of things, for an $8.5 million total.
Yes, and so knowing that, at least we'll know that we can start the cleanup process, because if you look at the numbers, we had 3 storms, or that one of them only was a hurricane category 1, and the rest were just the storms. And the cleanup cost doesn't go, it's close to $1 million.
Dorian, which was just a tropical storm in 2020, the cleanup cost was $765,000, and it wasn't even a Class 1 hurricane.
Yeah.
So that's why we said that when we were trying to figure out what these reserves must be, we're saying that if you really had a hurricane, the cleanup cost could easily be twice that.
And this cleanup would also include behind the gate?
It would be the what do you call it, behind the gate, cut and toss, which presumably some of that would get FEMA reimbursement. But if you look at the FEMA reimbursement rates, they're pretty low. And so basically we're saying this is what the cost that the town would incur wherever the cleanup happened.
But then
This would just be for a smaller hurricane. If we had got hit with 4 or 5, 8.5 million is not going to be nearly enough.
That's right.
Oh, no,
And
and
really
This is
it was-
probably like a 2 or
and-
maybe
but
3.
Part of the reason we started worrying about this reserve issue was that, people get hung up on the fact that we got these $20 million worth of stuff. And it's not like we have this money stacked in a corner somewhere. There is a certain amount of it
Yeah.
that is softly reserved for
Yeah.
things that, call it rainy day, call it whatever you want to
Yeah,
call
yeah,
it.
no, that's why we wanted to have a little bit of a semi-scientific breakdown on
Right.
what this really would
Yes.
cost us, right?
Well,
And this is, to me, still a surprisingly low number.
And this is just the beginning of, like I said, the discussion. We can come back and talk about more, but that's what I felt, that this is the minimum that you can, at least then we can start, operating on the island, cleaning up the island, working on a geo bond or a loan or something to, when those numbers are really high. So
I think two things, Deruta. I think, we're becoming more specific in terms of a source and use of application of funds. So on your 5-year capital improvements plans, what you're suggesting is that we have effectively this type of a sheet for each one of these different types of reserve items. I mean, this isn't an income statement. This is just almost a narrative that begins to explain
Yes.
how the reserves are going to be designated. I think this is fine. And then you can have some explanation behind it in terms of really what these projects are. Some explanation behind your other 3, revenue volatility and emergency reserve. I think it's fine.
And we do, and in this email that Dorota sent out, it does have the beginnings of those explanations.
Right. And I think this council can exercise judgment relative to what an appropriate level is, and future councils can do the same thing. They can say it's too high or it's too low. It's just the more
Yes.
explicit definition of really what the use of funds could be.
And then when
That's fine.
assigning those funds, so they're not for grabs or for, spending in the budget.
Yeah.
But it makes the discussion about, do we need those reserves or how
Absolutely.
big they are, et cetera. We've
Yes.
finally got some numbers behind where we can
Right.
say, listen, folks, right? I mean, we have certain things to really consider here, and that's the total amount. That's right. So it brings facts into a debate that until today was probably more emotional about, one opinion versus the other. I think this helps us to be far more, objective in that argumentation, right?
And I think we shouldn't kid ourselves that this is going to require a fairly heavy level of education. This is like maybe not even Finance 101. This is a precursor to Finance 101. We got to explain to people that we're not spending the money, that this is just a designation this is a potential designation for the money, a potential designation for reserves.
Well, it's if you got this pile of money, what is available to spend? Well, you can spend down to the level of that which you're reserving for.
Exactly. So,
And can I just add also, in here, as we're talking about, for instance, hurricane, and for 17 through 20, in the 20%, 26 and 24, FEMA actually reimburses us to pay up to between sometimes 70, 75%, or 80%. The reason why our cost looks low, and this happens every storm, is that we just go behind the gate and start cleaning. FEMA won't reimburse us for a lot of that.
Right.
So why this number is high is because we're taking on some of the costs for KICA.
Right.
If we were just go behind the gate and do a cut and toss, this number would not be as high. And you would show a higher percentage of FEMA reimbursement. Now, when I was at the hurricane conference in April, one of the things that I did talk with them about, and they sent me a form, and I think they're getting a little bit more relaxed on that, is what's called the Private Property Debris Removal Program, which we would have to apply for ahead of time. But with Matthew, the reason why we didn't is because everyone just wanted to get the island cleaned.
Yep.
And kind of throw out the fact that the town have to go through this whole process. So we did that. So that's why our reimbursement numbers look low. We really got the 80 or 75% from FEMA from our portion. We just didn't get the private portion.
Yeah, so,
If that makes sense.
Matthew, we spent $627,000 and FEMA reimbursed us $161,000.
Yeah.
So it was only 25% for any of the last 3 big storms.
Correct.
For the total.
So we were just to isolate Matthew and just pull out what the town public portion, then you would see a higher percentage, probably like 70 or 75%.
The fact is, we spent.
Right, we spent a lot of money that was not.
That was not
reimbursable.
Yeah.
And do we know what actually Kika spent on for any of those 3 storms?
We had before when we were looking into this, I just don't remember, I have to pull up that paperwork, and we have to reach out to them. We have an MOU with FEMA, we have an MOU agreement with Kika, and it talks about what we're going to do with the storm. And really, it talks about the town is going to do the initial cut and toss. It also talks about if we need to go in and assist with doing more removal for the major roads. We pick up, as you guys recall, after the storm, we give residents typically like 4 or 5 weeks. We pick all that up, but we don't get reimbursed back for that. So we can go back to Kika again, and because with Matthew, I believe there's a lot of boardwalk damage, so they incurred a lot of the cost because of that.
And then what they did is they have this special assessment for 3 years.
They did that.
We're still paying.
Yeah.
Because Kika does not get any FEMA money,
Correct.
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. But again, if there's another storm, I think we would, depending on the scale of the storm, we may go to FEMA and say we need to remove private debris. If it's just a vegetation storm like the last couple storms have been, Kika then takes more of the lead in removing, but we still incur costs because we're still removing a lot of the private debris.
Of course.
Okay.
So once this, we can look at this again, maybe in a couple of months, and maybe we will have better number. We close the year, and then we'll come back to it. In meantime, if there's any more instructions or, for me, I would appreciate that, your comments. And then at some point, there would be a resolution, because those policies that we have right now, they were adopted by a resolution. So we would have to change them or add to it, or however you want to go. But my main thing in this was that we want to just assign those reserves specifically, so it makes a little more transparent.
Your points, you're going to get hit with revenue, you're going to get hit with operating expenses, and you're going to get hit with capital.
Yep.
Potential for capital. So I mean, I think your broad categories are fine. There's going to be all kinds of what ifs going down them, but.
So we can look at this maybe, like ways and means. There is not a lot on the agenda too. So, and get some more feedback too, and give you an opportunity to think about this. And
so one question, Dorota. So you have the 8.5 million for what you call the emergency reserve, okay? Then the 500K for the capital project, right? Just to be on the safe side. And then your number 3, do I need to add number 3 as well? So are we now talking about 8.5 plus 0.5 plus 4?
That's correct.
But what is then the difference between the 4.5 in your emergency reserve and the 4 million for revenue volatility?
So when we had COVID, for example, we closed the island for a month or a little long, just for the tourists. I think maybe it was over 6 weeks. So there was no accommodation taxes, there was no hospitality taxes. So there is no outside of emergency from the storms or something that will, we never thought about COVID, 5 years ago. So something happens like this that we do not have. Our revenues are strictly coming from tourism or businesses. If something happens to economy, that it all goes down for a couple of months. So this was more for that reserve for this, just the kind of rainy fund if something happens that we're not bringing any revenue.
Okay, understood. So although the 4.5 in the emergency reserve has similar reason like your number 3, 4 million, but one is for storm, the other one is for another COVID or something.
Or whatever might
So
happen.
why those numbers are different? You're asking why are they?
Well, no, I understand that your 4.5 million is revenue loss because we have no tourists coming to the island because we just had a storm, right?
That's correct.
Your 4 million is revenue loss if we have another COVID event, right? And we are
COVID or
closing
something,
down.
yes.
So, but then I don't really have to add up all of these 3 items because that would mean kind of double counting for revenue loss.
Well,
what if we have a
maybe
hurricane
not.
after?
It depends. You could have 2 separate events.
Exactly.
you know, COVID year, we could have had a really bad hurricane, and then 3 months later, we have COVID. And so we would have gotten hit with 2 of these closure issues. So I think what the third item, the 4 million, that's the item number 3, is the one that's less clearly defined on what that covers.
Okay.
That's really a just-in-case number.
Understood. So what you're proposing is the 4.5, the 8.5 plus 500K, 9 million, plus the 4 million is 13 million. So we should always try to have 13 million of reserves at hand that we can use for the worst-case scenario that we are getting hit by a storm and by a pandemic.
Yeah, or we may, as a council, we may decide that, you know what, on that second 4 million, we just don't think that we need to reserve for the likelihood of having 2 of those catastrophic events, so just take that one out.
But on the other side, I mean, it's a reserve, right? I mean, we can be hit this fall by a category whatever, and then next year, you know, by a COVID situation again. Right? So it's not like we can replenish.
Your first hurricane might cost you 20 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but even if the 8.5 is right, it would happen this year. And we would not replenish those 8.5, you know, if in the following year we have a pandemic again. So that's your argumentation scheme here. So to speak. Okay.
And with the revenue loss with the hurricane, also it's not only that people will not come for the island, but then we were talking about possibly not charging for reconstructions, not charging permits or business licenses to make the rebuild the island process easier for a certain of time. We, you know, or this is just a suggestion. So there is a lot of components to those revenue losses, but again, this is just to start the discussion. So if, you know, in sometime you come back and feel that this is too high, too low, then we'll revisit.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll go to the next. This is very quick. The mayor
You have to do a chairman's report first.
Oh.
But I don't think I have anything else to say. So now it's your turn again.
Oh, okay. So this is just the first 3 quarters. And at the end of March, our fund balance was about 29 million. And of that amount, about 17 million is in general fund. And our revenues and expenditures, they do look pretty good. The revenues are, of course, over the budget. They, in overall, they about 10 million. So they about 1 million higher than they were last year, and about 85% of the total what we budgeted for this year. So our revenues will exceed the budget. And the variance comparing to last year is mostly because of the interest revenue.
Yeah.
The expenditures, they look pretty much reasonable and within the budget. There is few items that are going to be over the budget, and or when not over the budget, but when compared to last year, is the personnel cost, and that's related to increase in staffing and the beach patrol because of the new contract that we signed. And now it looks like the professional fees are going to be higher too, but it's not. This is on a cash basis, so I haven't accrued anything.
Dorota, I have one question. So if I remember correctly, this year we allowed business licenses to be renewed until the end of April.
That's correct.
Which is different to prior years, where...
Well, prior year was the first year. However, people were still in a habit of, because before that was February 28th.
Right.
So a lot of people renew earlier. This year, we just, I haven't started on April yet. I just look at the numbers. So we brought 1.4 in business licenses, I think.
Okay. So that means that if I would easily, just extrapolate from the 10.285 million of revenue in the first 3 quarters of this year, right? And would extrapolate to, to the full year, I would end up with 13.7. Assuming that the fourth quarter for us, right, would be exactly the average of the first 3. But that's actually not true, because our fourth quarter will see, an unprecedented jump in business license revenue.
That's correct.
So most likely, we might end up on the revenue side with somewhere around 14 million.
Yes.
Or probably even 15 if I just
and-
extrapolate and then add
Yeah.
the higher business license input. So that's where you expect us to come in, or somewhere between 14 and 15, or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Okay.
okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Just in terms of process, the first reading of the budget is tomorrow,
Yes.
and the public hearing will be when?
Wait. We haven't set it up, but it's like, well, now since Ways and Means moved to 1 o'clock, we'll probably do like 12 o'clock or something. So it's going to be May 22nd will be the public hearing.
Yeah.
Lunchtime?
Well, first of all, I would assume that you probably need more than an hour. A.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. A. Second,
Never had anyone. We know.
So second of all, it would be nice to have a lunch break for us at least.
Okay.
Okay. And third, I would really recommend that we make that announcement tomorrow in the town council meeting when that hearing is taking place, if that is possible.
And we probably ought to start it I would start it at 11.
I thought the same thing.
Or 10 maybe. If you think 2 hours, then you have an hour
Well,
break.
if you do 10, then we could have a lunch break and then have the council meeting 1. That's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah. But I would be happy if we could announce that timing and date, et cetera, tomorrow when the community is in the room.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
I agree, and I think we ought to put all of our collective heads together in terms of the type of presentation, because we're talking about, our monies are getting to be larger now. I think this is going to generate more interest. Start talking about $30 million worth of reserves and $13-14 million worth of revenue. We may, but I think conversely, we ought to promote it as much. And especially as we get questions coming in to say that we're going to do everything we can to answer questions. We're at a full TO now. Hopefully we'll stay at a full TO. So just try to anticipate interest rates. It's one of those things. It's an easy answer, but it must drive people crazy. Like, what are they doing? It was 40 grand and now it's.
But
Well, I'm
like
just
a
thinking.
summary?
It's an ideal time.
I think yes. I think yes, you would.
I would recommend that strongly, and this presentation should basically focus on the most likely questions that we get anyway, right? Like we had the question today about the employee cost going up.
The questions that were asked earlier at the meeting when they're quoting the numbers that changed dramatically. We can look at it and know the ones that change. We ought to be prepared to answer those.
And I would put that I would put that proactively. Although we have answered them already, like Alex's question about the interest, about the fund income, right? We already at least have answered that twice, but these questions will come back again. If we put a very brief presentation together with just the basic variations and the reasons for it, that can only be 3 or 4 pages, and we are done with it, and have already taken a lot of time off the table because people will not ask these questions again.
And I think we ought to take the proposition, this is, at that particular moment in time, this is our budget. So we ought to be in a position that we should be doing a lot of the explaining behind this. DeRuta's done everything she could as treasurer and has prepared the budget for us, but it's ours now.
Right.
So now we're going to explain it to the community. So I think we ought to, I don't know whether we divvy it up or somehow, one of the, I don't know what to think about that. I don't think it should all be one of us, but, each of us take a portion. But we ought to be talking about this so that people understand this isn't just Doruta's budget or Stephanie's budget. We're just sitting here, you know,
Yeah, it's our budget.
This is your budget, yes.
I
It
get
is our
it.
budget,
Yep.
you know. We're approving the
We're just working.
we're employing employee cost. You know, we're identifying, you know, revenues and the accommodation taxes and et cetera, so.
Okay. Any citizen comments? We have one citizen here.
Okay, in which case I will make a comment or two.
I knew you were waiting for something.
No. I think it's bad form just to leave you with no...
It would have been okay.
No town residents here. First off, Dorota and Stephanie, thank you. It's a sad reflection on me, but I've actually been through the numbers. I looked at them on Friday. I've been through the numbers, and you know, they're pretty good. Thank you. I will say, placeholders. There are a lot of placeholders around, and I think it's important that we identify what are placeholders, because they shouldn't be just, you know, in 6 months' time, they shouldn't just be taken as a budget. They were placeholders, if you see what I mean. Michael, to you, trash. I heard your comments on trash recently and your initiative. My understanding is...
Talking about hazardous.
Sorry?
You're talking about hazardous waste.
Sorry, hazardous waste.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, I'm actually talking about Carolina Waste. You mentioned it before. I know you've got your project, your beach project. I know you're concerned about hazardous waste. But my understanding is that Bees Ferry is no longer segregating recycling and trash.
That is true.
Therefore, that is why I think there was a question at your Sandcastle event. There was a question, was there? Or I may be confused about why are they just mixing the two? Well, they're mixing the two because there's no sorting. So basically now in our street, Snowy Egret, we have trucks come by on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday for the recycling, and also on a Thursday for the gardening waste. Now, the gardening waste is treated separately, but why do we need 2 trips? I mean, not everybody fills the trash can and their recycling can fully. If they're going together anyway, I mean, I don't think it's good that Bees Ferry and Carolina Waste are doing
I'm
this.
not 100% sure. So what I said at the Our World event in the Sandcastle is that my understanding is the reason why in certain HOA regimes they stopped separating is because there was no sense of separating it, because homeowners and renters in particular, I would assume, were not willing to really separate cleanly. Right? We have the same situation at Kestrel Court. I just looked at it on Friday. When you open the containers, you know, everything is everywhere.
Sure.
Right?
But this is a separate point. This is for
hold on.
individual house owners.
But the point is that, to my information, Bees Ferry does, or a facility of the county does, still fully recycle if it's clean recycling. Means it is not contaminated with A, hazardous waste, and B, with household waste, and C, even with certain things that you would put into the recycling bin, but you shouldn't, like, for example, plastic foil, plastic bags, etc., because those thin plastic materials, you know, screw up their machines. But I will look. But my understanding from the discussion I had with staff was that the separation still takes place as long as it is clean.
And I think that's there. I think the issue though at Bees Ferry is that when the stuff comes in on the garbage trucks that's coming out of a residential area like Kiowa, it's so unreliable that it's clean recycling. They just don't bother to separate it.
Exactly.
And if it comes from a bar where they know they're beer bottles or beer cans, then that's separate. But it's still not necessarily clean. But the people that throw pizza boxes in the corrugated, well, that can't be recycled. And so Bees Ferry generally is not separating the recyclable.
And Carolina Waste are no longer differentiating between the 2 separate trash containers. Sorry, the trash container and the recycling container. I asked them. So therefore, why are they sending down 2 trucks? One truck on a Tuesday, 1 truck on a Wednesday.
It's a great question.
If they're mixing the 2 together, because
So
it's a green initiative.
Yeah. So you asked at Beef Ferry, or you asked your crew that came by?
I asked the crew, because they're not differentiating. They said it's policy, it's changed at Bees Ferry. We're not separating.
So they
if
have a
someone
truck,
could ask
they have a truck that
South
goes
Carolina
around
Waste,
on Wednesdays and picks up all the recycling cans on Kiowa. They drive to Bees Ferry with this truck, and they point it at the same pile of crap they just dumped on Monday.
I believe
Because they're not separated.
Agreed, yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That's what I was
Someone
told
should
at Bees Ferry.
contact them to find out if that's the case, and if that's the case, why send us two trucks?
I will go. I was planning to go to Bees Ferries on Thursday anyway.
Right.
I will just take a little bit more time and investigate,
talk to
because
them,
if
because I think
that
that's
is
what you're
true, if that is true, it would violate a lot of things that we actually believe in.
I agree.
Right? And I, in particular, because separating your trash, I get jokes from my wife how diligent I am about these things
it's a
for the last
European
30
thing.
years. So
I agree.
So I will investigate. My understanding was different, but I will look into this, because if this is even remotely true, that would be horrible.
And I just confirmed, so Carolina Waste does not take our recyclables to Bees Ferry. They take it to Sunoco Recycling on Telco Road. That's where our recyclables go. I think Bees Ferry still take, if as a resident want to take theirs, but they're not taking commercial because they found that it's sometimes contaminated. But now we'll talk to Carolina Waste about what their staff is saying or what their staff is doing, but Carolina Waste takes the recyclables to Sunoco Recycling.
Yeah, okay, so that would
Please
match.
check it out, and we're done. Okay, sorry.
But I will, no. You're bringing up a good point, because that was my second comment, what Stephanie just said. I've observed multiple times, that the crews would just be out of their own convenience, throw stuff into whatever truck comes by. So in my little street, 5 homes, the Tuesday guys would pick up my yard debris, right? Or the Wednesday recycling crew would pick up my yard debris, right? And then this is contaminated. They cannot do anything with it. So it's often also the crew. So then the feedback.
Pay any attention to what's in
Yeah. So then the feedback we are getting from Carolina Waste, and Julie is managing that, is like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, we have to train our people better. They don't know that better, etc. So it's an ongoing issue. But I will certainly reconfirm together with Stephanie to make sure that this is handled the right way.
Okay, great. I really endorse the comments about publicizing the budget meeting, if we can put it on the website, because last year I think it passed everybody by. I don't know how many people you had turning up. No, we didn't have. I think it was just another Ways and Means Committee, and people.
Pretty much.
It was before the public hearing was always before the.
Yep.
I know, but I think people, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but I think people just assumed it was another Ways and Means, whatever. But anyway, I endorse saying that. There was a point on the agenda about allied security. We didn't discuss it.
About what?
The old agenda.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's the one that was outside, sorry. Okay.
That was an old one.
Okay. I think it's important you do finalize the reserve policy for hurricanes. I endorse what you're doing currently. If we could get it finalized, and then in the policies and procedures as a definite action. What else was there? Finally, to the new council members, bravo. All 3 of you, I think you're, well, there's only 1 of you here, but I think you're 3 of you are doing a great job, breath of fresh air. So thank you. I'd like to tell you, Michael.
I guess we're just chopping.
I'm sorry, no, but I mean, okay, sorry.
The good thing I don't have any feelings.
I'm not very politically correct, I'm sorry. But anyway, Michael, I hope your wife relaxes over time.
No.
My wife is very happy, I'll tell you that. And when are you going to tell her that you've signed up for 4 years and not 2?
Well, I signed
Have
up.
you told her yet?
Actually, now, oh yeah.
Okay.
We actually signed up for 5 now. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it, thank you.
Tomorrow.
Yep.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, committee meetings, comments? Committee members' comments? Motion to adjourn?